Hey, I'm Leo. Thank you so much for joining the course. I'm really excited about this. I've actually been working on this course for over a year. It's been a really long time. And some of the stuff that I'm going to say in this course might sound very obvious to some of you, and it might be totally new information to others. But basically, the frameworks that I've developed for this course, they're going to sound very obvious, and they're going to sound pretty simple, but that really was my goal. So this is actually my second time recording this course. The first time I recorded it, I sent it to some friends and they all said, hey, this is good, but you're just making it way too difficult. There's way too many different moving elements and stuff. And in hindsight, they were 100% correct. So I worked on it some more and just tried to simplify everything. So it's as easy as possible for you to learn very quickly and then implement very quickly. Because sounding smart benefits me, but it doesn't benefit you. So I really tried to make this a very simple framework. And right now you might be thinking you have no framework whatsoever, which is, the norm. Most people don't have a framework. So every time you sit down to write a title or design a thumbnail, you're starting from scratch. And that's a very frustrating and very overwhelming thing to have to do every single week, or maybe multiple times a week, depending on what your posting schedule is. Or if you haven't started your channel yet, you're in the starting stages, it will become a very frustrating and overwhelming thing to do multiple times or every single week. So my goal here was to develop frameworks for everything to make your life easier, and so you can spend more energy and time doing the fun thing, which is making the video, because I'm presuming most of you don't find the fun thing, coming up with a thumbnail. I'm presuming. But even if you do like coming up with titles and designing thumbnails, these frameworks here will hopefully just give you a good process, a good understanding of what makes a good title and what makes a good thumbnail. So for this course, just so you kind of understand my process, initially it was just meant to be a thumbnail course. But after creating my thumbnail channel and going through a lot of my audience's channels, just seeing the common mistakes that people are making, it made me once again relook at my course. And I just realized I can't just make it a thumbnail course. Even though thumbnails is what I'm good at, I realized that even if you have a perfect thumbnail, you do need a good title. So that took me down the rabbit hole of creating a title framework, and I looked at just an endless amount of titles of YouTube videos, ones that performed well, ones that didn't, and trying to really understand what makes a good title and what makes a bad title. Why does someone click this one and why does someone not click this one? And after a ton of work, and by work, I don't just mean like looking at other people's videos and just literally writing down what they've said, or just searching articles and just copying what they said. I mean like literally dissecting just an endless amount of titles. I found like the framework. And the framework, like I said, is going to sound so obvious, but right now you probably don't know this framework, but once it's said, you're going to see this everywhere. And you're going to realize, oh, it's just these components over and over again. Because it is really just 4 components for the title and 4 components for the thumbnail. So I really wanted to look much broader and try to understand and develop like an overarching strategy that works for everyone. Because if I'm just giving away tactics, saturation might work for you, maybe, I don't know. That's not very useful for you. So it's really about going much broader and understanding the fundamental psychology behind titles and thumbnails. I hope this is useful to you. I'm really excited about this. So let's get into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about is value. All right, first this was going to be a thumbnail course. Then this became a title and thumbnail course. And then I realized before I even talk about titles and thumbnails, I need to discuss value first. So as humans, the only reason we consume content is for value. And value can be broken down into 2 categories. You might have heard 3, but I disagree with that. I think it's 2 categories with some subcategories. So those 2 categories, the only reason someone will consume content is for either entertainment or for education. That is it. So for every single video you make, you have to decide, is this going to be an entertainment-based video or an education-based video? You can find ways to mix the 2 to make educational videos entertaining and entertainment-based videos educational, but you really want to pick one, and then yes, you can sprinkle in a bit of the other value. For example, my channel is educational-based. You are watching it to learn something. And then there are a million different entertainment-based channels where you are watching it to be entertained. Now, both of these might sound kind of abstract, but there are subcategories to both of them. So let's dive into them. For education, there are 2 subcategories. You have gain motivation and loss aversion. These are the 2 reasons that people consume educational content. If you sit down to watch an educational video, you are either trying to gain something or you are trying to avoid losing something. They are the two reasons. As an example, a gain motivation would be a video titled such as how to make another $1,000 per month. So you are gaining $1,000 per month. A loss aversion would be how to stop losing $1,000 per month. Now, typically, this isn't always the case, but typically humans are more loss aversion minded. We are typically more likely to not want to lose something than we are to gain something. That is typically the case. And that's quite an important thing to understand for educational channels. So gain motivation and loss aversion are the two genres of educational videos. Now that we know that, we have to understand how people measure value. So they want to learn something, so they're looking for an educational-based video, or they see your educational-based video. Now they're seeing if it's a gain motivation or a loss aversion-based video. Now the way that they will judge your video is based on a specific metric. And for educational videos, it's quite easy. The metric is just how much are they learning? How many lessons are being learned? And ideally, it's new lessons. So if you're telling people stuff that they already know, they're not going to find it very valuable. Whereas if you're teaching them new lessons, then they are going to find it valuable. So to be a valuable educational channel and to make valuable educational videos, you have to either give them gain motivation or loss aversion videos. And you can have both of these types of videos on your channel, 100%. And now when they are watching your video, they are measuring how many lessons am I learning in this video. That is the metric of value for educational-based videos. I hope that makes sense. Now let's talk about entertainment. Now entertainment is where I see most people making a mistake. Entertainment is pretty obvious once you break it down to these categories. Basically, entertainment is broken down into movie genres. So if you think about movie genres, you have comedy, you have drama, you have action, you have adventure, you have horror, you have romance, for example. So all of these different movie genres, they are the different subcategories of entertainment. So when someone is looking for an entertainment channel or an entertainment-based video, they are thinking, which genre do I want to consume? And ideally, it doesn't have to be the case, but ideally your channel focuses on one of these genres. So for your channel, you want to pick one movie genre. Are you a comedy channel? Are you an adventure channel? Are you a spectacle channel? Are you a horror channel? It's really up to you, but you really want to pick one. Because if I go onto your channel and I'm thinking, should I subscribe to this channel? And I'm seeing, okay, some videos are horror videos, some videos are comedy videos, and some videos are documentaries. That just confuses me as a potential subscriber because I don't know what I can expect from this channel. I don't know what value you are providing. So ideally, for your channel, pick one. Now that you understand your genre, so let's say comedy, for example, now you have to understand how are people measuring my value per video. So with education, it's simply how much am I learning? So lessons learned. That is the way that people are measuring that value. Now for entertainment, all of these subcategories, so the movie genres, they all have different ways of being measured. So for comedy, it's how many times do you laugh? For adventure, it's how many times do you say, whoa? For a spectacle video, how many times do you say, wow? For a drama, it's how many times do you get worried and go, uh-oh, what's going to happen? For horror, it's how many times do you get scared? For romance, it's how many times do you go, ooh? And each movie genre has the specific reaction that you are measuring with. And basically, you want to give that emotional response as many times as possible. For example, if I'm watching a 10-minute comedy video and I laugh once, that's not very valuable. You're not providing the value that I'm after, which is laughing that many times. It's only one laugh for 10 minutes. So that's a pretty bad value. But if you make me laugh 100 times in 10 minutes, then that's a very valuable video. And for a spectacle video, for example, if I don't go, whoa, that many times, if I say it once in your 10-minute video, it's not a very valuable video. I hope that makes sense. So basically, there are two types of value. There's entertainment and there's education. Then for education, there are two types of genres. There is a loss aversion and there is gain motivation. These are the two genres for education. For entertainment, the different genres are simply the different movie genres. You have inspirational, you have comedy, you have spectacle, you have horror, you have action. For educational videos, the way to measure if the video is valuable is simply how much am I learning? For entertainment, the way to measure if the video is valuable, it is simply, am I getting the emotional response that I'm after from that movie genre? For comedy, how many times am I laughing? For inspirational, how many times am I feeling inspired? For horror, how many times do I get scared? Not understanding value is one of the biggest, if not the biggest mistake that small channels are making. Your channel in every single video needs to provide value. Humans do not watch stuff just for the sake of watching stuff. Otherwise, we would just sit and stare at a wall all day. Every single video that you make has to be valuable. I see a lot of small channels posting stuff that they want to post, that they find interesting, but as a consumer, it is not valuable. Make sure for every single video that you make, you understand the value that you are providing to the audience. So I hope you found this useful, as it is a core fundamental to understand. Now that you understand that, let's get into the next step, which is writing the title. All right, let's talk about titles. So this is going to be broken down into two parts. The first part here, I'm just going to talk about the formula so you can understand the fundamental requirements or components or ingredients, whatever you want to call it, in the titles. Now this works for entertainment-based and educational-based channels. This here is I think it's so useful, and it's going to sound so obvious when you hear it. So I just want you to remember right now, most likely you don't have a fundamental formula or framework for writing titles, but when I say it, you'll be like, yeah, obviously. But right now, most likely when you're sitting down, you don't have a framework whatsoever. This took me months to figure out, by the way. This took me so long, but it's so obvious when you read it. And in this video, I'm simply just going to go through the components. And in the next video, I'm going to go a bit more detailed, where basically I'm going to talk about how you can maximize your views. Because basically for each of these components here, if you tweak them, you can get more views. But before we talk about maximizing views, we just want to understand the different requirements in the title. Cool, let's get into it. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be so useful. Quickly to mention, if you're an entertainment channel or if you're an educational channel, watch both. I'm going to talk about both here. I think it's important to understand because most likely if you're trying to create YouTube videos, you're watching a lot of YouTube. Picking up on these different ingredients or requirements in the title, you'll start seeing patterns on YouTube, and just knowing why something works and why something doesn't work, even if you're in entertainment or in education and vice versa, you just want to have that deep understanding of how YouTube works. So I recommend, if I'm talking about entertainment and you're in education, just watch it because it's good to know. It's just good to see the patterns, and you'll see what's working in entertainment or in education and learn from both of them. Hope that makes sense. All right, let's get into it. So the formula is the same for both entertainment and education, but there are some minor tweaks that I mentioned. All right, here it goes. Who, verb, noun, difficulty. Who, verb, noun, difficulty. They are the 4 requirements for a successful title. Now they are slightly different for entertainment or education, but they are the 4 components that you want for both entertainment and education. Who, verb, noun, difficulty. That's it. So I'll break this down now for entertainment and education, and I'll also give you 15 examples for each, just so you can really see how it works in practice. All right, let's talk about entertainment. But like I mentioned, if you're in education, I still recommend you watch this. All right, for entertainment, who? You'll typically see something like, I tried, and then some challenge, or I did this, or whatever it is. It's normally I, but sometimes you'll see something like professional chef, or millionaire, or whatever it is. What's happening there is you have to establish who the story revolves around. Who is this video following? Now, every single entertainment video is simply a story. It is simply just a hero's journey. That is what we are watching. As humans, if we're watching an entertainment video, we simply want to watch a hero's journey. If you haven't heard of the term hero's journey before, it's basically just a filmmaking framework. And what humans want to watch is someone overcome a challenge. And remember, that's for entertainment, so that's not education. Entertainment, we want to watch someone overcome a challenge. That is a story, really simplified. So for the who part of this title framework, you're either going to want to be the ideal person to overcome this challenge, or you're going to be the worst person to try and overcome this challenge. That's what's going to make it interesting. So let's look at an example. Our value will be entertainment, and our movie genre will be action. So for the who part here, if we're having someone that is the best person to overcome this challenge, that would be something like James Bond. James Bond is the perfect person to try and overcome this challenge. Or Mission Impossible, for example. Tom Cruise is the perfect person to try and overcome this challenge. Or we could do the opposite. Who is the worst person to try and overcome this challenge? So that could be the movie Spy with Melissa McCarthy, or 21 Jump Street. They are the least likely to try and overcome this challenge. That is what's going to make an interesting story. So to put this into YouTube terms, let's say you have a video where someone is trying to make a 5-star dish. That can be interesting if it's the best person for the challenge or if it's the worst person for the challenge. For example, it's a professional chef makes a 5-star dish, or it's the worst person to try that challenge. So person who's never cooked before tries to make a 5-star dish. Now, like I mentioned, that is for entertainment. That's not the same for education. So now we have the who requirement for the title. The next part here is verb. What is happening in the video? What is the verb? So verb just means doing word. What is the doing word? What is the action that's happening in this video? It could be prank, it could be tried, it could be survived, it could be explored, it could be cooked, it could be spent, it could be whatever. That is just your verb. It is what are you doing in this video? The next part here is noun. Now for the noun, so a noun is just like an object, a place, a name, something like that. Your goal here is to make this as well known as possible. The more well known it is, the more people will recognize it, and you're only going to click on a video if you recognize what that thing is. People are less likely to click on a video if they don't know what that thing is. For someone to click on a video where they don't know what the thing is, they really have to love that creator, but then your views are limited to only the people who are, really big fans of you. So that's why you want to pick a noun that is as recognized as possible. And ideally, this noun has to be recognized by your target audience. If you said, trying to eat as much and then some really obscure food, you're not going to click on that video if you don't know what that food is. If your target audience doesn't know what that noun is, they simply won't click on the video. And now lastly, we have the difficulty level. So for entertainment-based channels, you want to make the difficulty sound as difficult to do as possible. And this comes down to, once again, the hero's journey. If you are watching a movie, or if someone's telling you a story, and the challenge was really easy for them to overcome, that makes an incredibly boring story or an incredibly boring movie. That is not entertaining. So you want to make sure your entertainment-based videos sound as difficult as possible to overcome. You want the difficulty level as hard as possible. That is your goal here. If I told you a story and it was, so today I went to a coffee shop and I had to step over this rock, that's the most boring story ever. If it was, today I went to a coffee shop and in order to get there, I had to cross and climb up a mountain. That's more interesting. It's more difficult to do. Entertainment is more interesting when it is difficult to do. That sounds very obvious when it comes to movies and stories, but we forget to apply it into YouTube. And entertainment is simply just stories. Whether they're true stories or not true stories, it doesn't matter. We are watching a story. We want to watch someone overcome something. So you want to make sure for your entertainment channel, the thing you're overcoming is as difficult as possible to overcome. So that is your goal. So they are the 4 requirements for a good title. So what I've done here is actually come up with 15 different entertainment videos, just as examples, so you can see how all 4 components come together to make a really good title. So I wanted to go through 15 examples so it's pretty clear and obvious before we go on to education, because for education, the formula is slightly different. All right, entertainment. Undercover chef tries to cook Michelin star dish for only $5. I tested Elon Musk's 4 a.m. morning routine. I paid voice actors to narrate my entire life. I swam in shark-infested waters covered in meat. I investigated the private jets of celebrities. Engineer builds a Tesla from scratch for $500. I trained with the FBI for 7 days. Nerd goes undercover on red carpet event wearing $10 outfit. I recreated viral GoPro videos with my fridge camera. I tasted pizza from every restaurant in Italy. I survived the Sahara Desert for 24 hours alone. I transformed my body in 30 days without exercising. I ate nothing but ice cream for 1 month straight. I bought an island for $12. So I hope these examples I came up with are useful. This here is the formula in practice. So when you're sitting down to come up with a title, so if you can get these 4 requirements in your title, you are going to have an incredible video idea. All right, so now let's talk about education, as it is slightly different. But once again, if you're in entertainment, I still recommend you watch this because you'll pick up on the patterns and you'll really get an understanding of why stuff does well on YouTube and why other stuff doesn't. All right, so now let's talk about education. With education, it's the same formula, but there are some slight changes to it. However, we still have who, verb, noun, difficulty. All right, let's talk about who. So with who for entertainment, it can be interesting to watch someone that isn't that good for the challenge. Whereas if you're watching to learn something, it's not going to be very valuable if you're watching someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So for education, you want to watch the person who is the best person to deliver that information. So let's say the video idea was how to build a $1 billion company, and it was either presented by me or Bill Gates. You're probably going to click on the one delivered by Bill Gates because I don't have a $1 billion company, so it's not going to be that valuable to hear it from me. When we are trying to learn something, i.e. education, we want to hear it from the person who is best suited to tell that information. I hope that makes sense. And basically, in the title, you want to say why you're the right person to tell this information. For example, if it was how to fix a pipe from leaking, it's going to be plumber shows how to stop a pipe from leaking, rather than just some random person. You're going to trust the plumber more to tell that information than me. Now, some of you might be thinking, yeah, but I don't want to always put millionaire or plumber or whatever your profession is in the title. I totally get that. So what you can do is put that information visually in the thumbnail, but I'll talk about that more in detail in the craft process for thumbnail design. All right, the next requirement in the title is the verb. The verb here comes down to the educational genre that I mentioned before. We have gain motivation and loss aversion. So you're going to choose a verb here that makes sense for that genre. So here are some examples. If we're doing gain motivation, it could be something like learn, develop, make more, get more, boost, build, unlock, activate. These are all verbs that are gaining. So you're gaining something, you're learning, you're developing, you're getting more of something. So that's gain motivation. Or if your video is going down the loss aversion route, then it could be something like stop losing, avoid, prevent, block, end, those kind of words. So they are verbs that are loss aversion verbs. So if I use the same example from before, how to make another $1,000 per month, or how to stop losing $1,000 per month. The verb here is changing if it is a gain motivation video or a loss aversion video. So now we have the who and the verb. The next part here is the noun. And what you want to do is ensure the noun is as recognized as possible. The less recognized this noun is, the smaller your total addressable market will be. So basically, the less people that know and understand what this noun is, the less people that will click on it. You're only going to click on that video if you understand what that noun is, obviously. So for example, let's say the who is email expert. Then let's say the verb is a gain motivation. So it's email expert shows how to get 1,000 more followers on. And then let's say the noun here is MailChimp. So email expert shows how to get 1,000 more followers on MailChimp. Your video idea here will be limited to the amount of people that use MailChimp. And if people don't know what MailChimp is, they definitely won't click on that video. And just to show you loss aversion for that title, it would be email expert shows how to stop losing 1,000 followers on MailChimp. So we have those two examples here of gain motivation and loss aversion, and both of those are limited to the amount of people that know what that noun is. But sometimes there are downsides, and this is just for educational channels, on having too broad of a noun, having too many people recognize the noun. But you still have to understand that you want the who, the verb, and the noun for an educational video. Now the next part here is difficulty. You want to make this sound as easy as possible to do. So this is the exact opposite of entertainment videos. In entertainment, we like watching someone overcome a challenge. We like watching someone do something as difficult as possible. That makes a good story. That makes an interesting story. Now for education, if we're learning something, we want it to be as easy as possible to do. If I told you, hey, you can learn Spanish in 3 days versus, hey, I can teach you Spanish in 3 years, it's going to be a lot more appealing to learn it in 3 days. Now this just comes down to fundamental human psychology. Humans, biologically speaking, are wired to conserve energy, and that's both mentally and physically. So basically, we're drawn to learn something that's easy, aka to use less energy. And another reason for this is that humans crave instant results, and this comes down to dopamine. We get dopamine releases when we learn something, so the quicker we learn something, the quicker we get that dopamine, which is what we're after. So basically, just to summarize that, for educational videos, you want to make the thing sound as easy as possible to do. All right, so now we have these 4 components for educational videos. We have who, we have verb, we have noun, and we have difficulty. Now, like I mentioned, for entertainment-based videos, we are basically always watching a hero's journey. We are watching someone overcome something. For entertainment, it is pretty much always a how-to video. It is pretty much always a tutorial. Whether it's disguised as something else, that's what we're watching. So let's go through this title formula. So like I mentioned, for education, it's pretty much always a how-to video, even if it's disguised as something else. But for these examples here, most of them, I've just made them very obvious that it's a how-to video. All right, let's go through the examples. How to get more Instagram followers with this one setting change. How to clean your fish tank in 3 minutes. How to start a podcast with 0 equipment. Lead expert reveals how to write better cold emails using this formula. Millionaire's guide to launching a business with just $50. How to design logos with any graphic design skills. How to lose belly fat with one simple exercise. How to paint landscapes with this secret composition trick. How to save $500 per week with this blueprint. How to edit videos like a pro in 30 minutes. How to grow indoor plants without any sunlight. Bodybuilder shows how to build a home gym for only $100. How to master public speaking in 20 minutes. How to bake perfect cookies with this recipe. Brain expert shows how to improve your memory in 1 easy step. As you can see, there's always these 4 components that you want in a title. These 4 requirements here are really useful in creating a good title that people actually want to click on. Now, if you're thinking, how can I maximize my views? How can I get even more views? I'll talk about that in the next video. But in this video, I just wanted to explain those 4 components there and how they work. But like I mentioned, if you want to maximize your views, then let's get into the next video. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to maximize views for entertainment-based channels. I find this really interesting and so useful because basically after just dissecting just so many videos, countless videos, I basically just realized that playing with these 4 components here will decide basically how many views you get. Now for entertainment, it's actually easier to understand. With education, there are some incentives to getting less views if you're selling something and stuff like that, which comes down to conversion and prior knowledge and stuff like that. Whereas with entertainment, if you're primarily making money through AdSense, or maybe you're selling consumables or reasonably low ticket stuff, then you are pretty incentivized to get as many views as possible. So let's talk about it. This here is my 4 scales for deciding how many views you'll get. And I have a bonus video in this course where I go through in real time coming up with titles using these scales here. This is so important to understand. And honestly, it's quite fun to do. It's almost like a puzzle. So let's get into it. The first component is who. So what you want to do here is increase the trust in why you're the right person to tell the story. And when I say you, I basically mean whoever the story revolves around. So if you're filming your friend go through a weight loss journey, for example, the who is your friend. It's not you with the film camera. But most of the time for smaller channels, the who will be you. So your goal here in your packaging is the title and thumbnail, is to explain why you are the right person to tell the story. So like I mentioned in the other video, it's interesting to watch a story if that person is the perfect person to try and overcome this challenge, or if they are the worst person to try and overcome this challenge. All we're trying to do is increase trust in why you're the right person to tell this story. Now, after diving into this, I really tried to understand, why is someone more likely to click on a video based on the person? And from really thinking about this and researching and thinking about psychology and everything, I came down to these 4 reasons that someone is more likely to click on the video based on the person. One of them can be controlled in the title. The other can be controlled off platform. And the last 2 you don't have control over. But I still want to talk about all 4. So let's start with the 2 that you can't control. These 2 that you can't control are watch time trust and YouTube stats trust. Watch time trust is basically the more you watch someone, the more trust you get with them, meaning you are more likely to watch their next video. For example, if you watched one of my videos for 10 minutes and you thought, hey, this guy actually knows what he's talking about, I really like him, the next time I post and you see that in your feed, you are more likely to click on it because you have that watch time there. The more watch time you get with someone, the more trust you get for that creator. Hope that makes sense. But obviously we can't control that in the title and thumbnail. We can't put something like, you've watched 40 hours of our content, so you're going to like this video. That is one where we can't use copywriting or design to influence people. The other thing that we can't control is YouTube stats trust. So this form of trust comes from views or trending on YouTube, stuff like that. So basically, if I saw the same video, but one of them had 10,000 views and one of them had 2 views, I'm more likely to trust the video that has 10,000 views. Now, obviously, again, we can't control that because otherwise we would just say 20 million views. So those two here that we can't control purely come from making good videos. I still wanted to mention them because they do affect if someone trusts your video, if they trust the who part of your video. But since you can't control it, we won't dive too much into it. The next one is recognizability trust. So this is one of the two that you can control. This comes down from purely being recognizable. And people are more likely to trust someone that they recognize. For example, if you scroll on TikTok and you've seen someone's face 50 times, and now you open up YouTube and you see that face that you recognize, you are more likely to click on that video purely because you recognize that face. An easy example is when celebrities create YouTube channels. The reason they grow so quickly is because you recognize them. And if you recognize that celebrity, you're more likely to click on that video because you're like, hey, I know that guy. And there's a few different ways to get recognizability, but it typically comes from off platform or at least off channel. So that could be posting content on other platforms. That could be going on podcasts. That could be writing a book and people recognize that name. That could be being a celebrity or being known in your niche. Whatever it is, that is one you can control. Now, I don't recommend you focus on that one, but I did want to mention it because it does affect how much people trust a video when they see it based on recognizability. Now, lastly, we have this thing called authority trust. This is the one that I would focus on the most. You've probably heard the YouTube advice of make videos on something that you know of, or make videos on something that you're an expert in. And that is because you can control this aspect. For example, when I make videos, I might say something like, thumbnail expert or thumbnail designer or YouTube expert or something like that. You are more likely to trust that video because it has that authority trust in the title. Or as another example, if it is, I try to make the best lasagna in the world versus professional chef makes the best lasagna in the world, you are more likely to trust the professional chef. Now, authority trust comes from accolades, it comes from credentials, it comes from professions, stuff like that. Now, these are things that you can control. If you don't have a lot of credentials that you can use in your thumbnail or in your title, then you would probably stick to the classic YouTube formula of just saying I. Saying I in the title is completely fine. I put that center in this trust line, but for you to get more views, you really have to lift up these other levers here on the scale in order to get more views. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know and I can make another video on that. All right, the next requirement here in the title is the verb. Now for this scale, on one end we have boring and on the other end we have exciting. And basically all you want to do here is think, is this thing that I'm saying the most exciting way of saying it? So for example, if the who is I and the verb is look at, what are more exciting ways of saying look at? So look at kind of sounds pretty boring. So maybe it's investigate or maybe it's research. Those words here are more exciting. Seeing I look at versus I investigate. Investigate just sounds more exciting. And that video setup there is the same idea with just making the verb more exciting. So one of the easiest ways to get more views is just to look at your verb that you're using and to make it sound less boring, make it sound more exciting. The next part here is the noun. Now, typically this is the biggest mistake that I see with entertainment channels. They are picking nouns that are too niche. So on one end of this scale, you have niche, and on the other end of this scale, you have known. For entertainment, most likely you want as many views as possible. So you want to pick something that is as known as possible. Let's say you have a channel where you draw stuff, for example. If you say, I try to draw, and then you pick a noun that is very, very niche and not a lot of people recognize, you're going to get less views. So it's I draw and then some obscure character. versus I draw SpongeBob, for example, or someone that is extremely well known. You are going to get more possible people to click on the video if that noun is more well known. And you really want to pay attention to this because this will have a really, really big effect on the amount of views you can get. And ideally, you think about the title before you make the video. This will heavily dictate that. Pick nouns that more people know. If I say I travel Oceania versus I travel Australia, more people will click on I travel Australia because more people recognize that noun. More people recognize Australia than Oceania. Or I cuddle marsupials versus I cuddle kangaroos. More people will recognize kangaroos than marsupials. So whatever idea you have, try to go from niche to more known. That is going to help you a lot with your views. Now, lastly, we have the difficulty. Like I've mentioned, with entertainment videos, people like watching stories that are difficult to overcome. So when you're brainstorming title ideas, try to think, how can I get this to sound even more difficult to do? The more difficult it sounds to achieve, the more interesting it is. You're more likely to click on a video where it's difficult to do. So look at this scale here and just think, is this video idea that I have actually difficult to do? And you've probably picked up on this trend on YouTube. Difficulty is getting more and more difficult. Before it could be, I spend $1,000. Now it has to be, I spend $10,000 or $100,000. A lot of people complain, and I totally get it, about like spectacle YouTube and how everything is just becoming much larger. But that is just the nature of humans. We like to watch stuff that is difficult to do. So if there are two options and one story is more difficult, that is more interesting for us to watch. Now, if this sounds a bit abstract, let's look at some examples here. And we're going to look at all 4 components and how we can get more views. And then we'll combine all of these changes into having a really, really good title. All right, here's my original title. I tried the soldier athleticism test. That's my video idea, and I think this is a really good video. Now what I recommend you do is just draw out on these scales here where each of these requirements sit on that scale. So how can we make I more trustworthy? Why are you the ideal person to tell this story? And remember, that's either because you are the perfect person to overcome this challenge or you are the worst person to try and overcome this challenge. So I tried the soldier athleticism test. So let's say that's the video that I want to make. Well, I don't have any muscles, as you can see. So maybe it's skinny guy tries the soldier athleticism test. I would be the worst person to try and do this because I can't do a single pull-up. So that would be more interesting to watch. So now how can we make this verb more exciting? Right now it's tried. Tried is kind of interesting, but it's not insanely exciting. So how can we make it more exciting? Well, maybe it's competed. So instead of I tried the soldier athleticism test, it's I competed in the soldier athleticism test. That sounds more exciting. There's more people involved. You know, it's a competition. So yeah, that verb basically went from kind of boring to exciting. All right, the next part here is the noun. So how can we make this less niche and more known? Right now, it's soldier athleticism test. Athleticism is a pretty specific term. It's kind of niche. It's not a super common word that we use. So how can we make that less niche and more known? Well, maybe it's I tried the soldier fitness test. So now we've just taken it from niche to known. Everyone can recognize the word fitness versus athleticism. So it's still the exact same premise for the video, but more people can recognize it because that noun is more known. And now let's look at the difficulty level. So right now it's I tried the soldier athleticism test. How could we make soldier even more difficult? That already sounds pretty difficult. It's a soldier athleticism test. But how can we just make it even more difficult? Maybe it's the Navy SEAL athleticism test. That sounds even more difficult now. So now what we've done is take all these 4 separate components and made the title even better. So if we combine all of them, we went from I tried the soldier athleticism test to skinny guy competes in the Navy SEAL fitness test. Now that is a much better title. Now you might be thinking, this is quite a long title. Skinny guy competes in the Navy SEAL fitness test. That is quite long. So what I like to do in the craft process of thumbnail design is, if the title is too long, to take away components from the title and just put that in the thumbnail instead. So I'll go into detail with it in the craft process. It's specifically the R part in the craft process. I'll talk about it there. But just as an example, if we removed skinny guy from the title, we could put that in the thumbnail instead. So in the thumbnail, you see me looking very skinny and you're going to think, well, that guy's not going to be very good at the Navy SEAL fitness test. Of course not. So you're still getting that information there. It's now just visual instead of being in the text. So the premise is still this skinny guy will compete in the Navy SEAL fitness test, even if the title now just says, I compete in the Navy SEAL fitness test. Hope that makes sense. Let's look at another example. All right, here's my video idea. I try porterhouse. That's my video idea. I'm going to eat some porterhouse. How can we optimize all of these 4 requirements? All right, so again, I'll just pretend that I'm going to film this video. So for the I here, it can either be, I am the ideal person to try this challenge, or I am the worst person to try this challenge. So let's pretend I'm a professional eater and I do eating challenges and stuff. That could be one angle, or it could be the opposite angle. So for example, I'm vegetarian, so it would be vegetarian tries porterhouse. So I would be the worst person to try and tackle this challenge. That is now more interesting than just I try porterhouse. Vegetarian tries porterhouse. All right, let's look at the next component, which is the verb. Right now, the verb is try. I try porterhouse. You're just tasting porterhouse. That's not that exciting. So how can we make that more exciting? Maybe it's survive, for example. So I survive a porterhouse. That sounds more exciting. That sounds more like a challenge. And remember, with entertainment, we are watching someone overcome a challenge. We're watching a hero's journey. All right, the next part here is the noun. So the noun is porterhouse. Porterhouse is pretty specific, you have to know what a porterhouse is. It's not that super well known depending on where you're from and stuff. So how can we basically make that less niche and more known? Well, it would probably be just saying steak. So I try steak. More people will recognize what steak means than porterhouse. So we're moving from niche to known. All right, the next requirement is the difficulty. So I try porterhouse doesn't even have a difficulty associated with it. So how can we make this sound difficult? Well, maybe it's I try the 2-pound porterhouse challenge. Now this sounds, like you're overcoming something. It's a challenge. We're watching a hero's journey. We're watching someone overcome something. So I try the 2-pound porterhouse challenge. And now if we combine all of this, we went from I try porterhouse, not that great of a title, to vegetarian survives the 2-pound steak challenge. It's the same video. It's me sitting down to eat a porterhouse. It's the exact same premise. But what we've done is just use these 4 components here and optimize the title to get more views. We are just looking at these 4 requirements here and trying to optimize them. We are looking at the scale and seeing how can we get more views. And obviously, if you saw these 2 videos here, I try porterhouse versus vegetarian survives the 2-pound steak challenge. It is the same video. It's me sitting down to eat a porterhouse. It's the same thing, but one sounds a million times more exciting, meaning it will do so much better with views. Hope that was useful. Let's go through another one because this is so important to understand. Okay, I eat bourguignon in Paris. That's the video idea that I wrote down. Instead of making this about me again, let's just say that this is a chef channel, a cooking channel, something like that. So for the I, this time, instead of saying it's the worst person for this challenge, let's say that it's the best person to tackle this challenge. So maybe it's professional chef, 5-star Michelin chef, something like that. So maybe it's undercover chef eats bourguignon in Paris. You're now more likely to click on this video because you trust the person who's going to tell that story. All right, let's look at the verb. The verb is eat. That's kind of interesting. How could we make that more interesting? It's kind of boring, to be honest. Well, maybe it's rank. So I rank bourguignon in Paris. That's now more exciting. All right, let's look at the noun. So the noun here is bourguignon. I feel like bourguignon is pretty niche. If you don't know what a bourguignon is, that proves my point. So bourguignon is very niche. Let's just make it more known. French restaurants. That's way more known. It's the same premise. You're going to a restaurant, and instead of specifying that you're eating bourguignon, let's go very known with it. It's French restaurants. Anyone can understand that. So now it's I eat at French restaurants in Paris. And now how do we make this sound more difficult? So right now, I eat bourguignon in Paris. It sounds pretty easy to do. So right now it just doesn't sound that difficult. Well, maybe it's 5-star. So that makes it sound more difficult to do. It's not just random bourguignon at a cafe for $12. It's going to cost you more and be more difficult to achieve. So I eat 5-star bourguignon in Paris. And now if we combine all of these, we went from I eat bourguignon in Paris to undercover chef ranks 5-star French restaurants in Paris. A much, much better title. Again, it's the same premise. It's the exact same video. You're going to restaurants to eat bourguignon, but this time we're just phrasing it to sound way, way better. We're looking at these 4 requirements here and just tweaking them to get more views. And like I mentioned, that's quite a long title here. Undercover Chef ranks 5-star French restaurants in Paris. But what we'll do, if it's too long, is in the R part of the craft process for thumbnail design, is we'll take some of those ingredients here from the title and put them in the thumbnail instead. So as a quick example, in Paris, let's remove that and instead have the Eiffel Tower in the thumbnail, because now you very quickly understand when seeing this thumbnail, hey, this video takes place in Paris. But we've managed to remove 2 words there from the title. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped, and I'll see you in the next video. In this video, I'm going to go through educational videos and how to maximize the views. This here is my 4 scales for deciding how many views you'll get. This is so important to understand, and honestly, it's quite fun to do. It's almost like a puzzle. So yeah, let's get into it. So for the who part of the title, there are 4 ways that we can get more trust in the title. So for education, you want to ensure that it's obvious that you are the right person to be delivering this information. Now, there are 4 ways that we can increase trust. 2 of them you cannot control, and 2 of them you can control. So I want to first talk about the ones that you can't control, because it's still useful to understand. Now, when I say can't control, you kind of can control them by making good videos, but you can't like actively change it, if that makes sense. But basically, the better videos you make, that will impact these 2 factors here. So factor number 1 is the watch time trust. Basically, the more you watch someone, the more you trust them. If you've watched one of my videos for 10 minutes, if you see another one of my videos come up in your feed, you're going to say, hey, I recognize that guy, I trust him. I've watched him talk for 10 minutes, I trust him, he was saying good stuff. So you're more likely to click on this video here. Or if you see my video versus another guy who you've watched 50 minutes of, you're going to trust the person you've watched 50 minutes of more than you're going to trust me. That's just watch time trust. The more time that you watch someone, the more trust you build up with them. That makes sense. Now, you can't really change that in the title. You can't say, hey, you've watched 40 hours of my content, click on this one here. So you can't really impact that one. That one just comes from making good videos. And the other one here that comes from making good videos is the YouTube stats trust. So that would be stuff like the amount of views a video has, or maybe if your video is trending on YouTube, you can't directly impact that and say, hey, I want this to be trending on YouTube. But obviously, if you make better videos, you have that chance. And if you make better videos, then you are going to get more views. So basically, if I saw the same video, but one of them had 10,000 views and one of them had 2 views, I'm more likely to trust the video that has 10,000 views. Now, obviously, again, we can't control that because otherwise we would just say 20 million views. So those 2 here that we can't control purely come from making good videos. Now, the 2 things that you can control are recognizability trust and authority trust. So let's talk about that. So recognizability trust is just if you recognize someone. And that's typically off platform or off channel, so not on your channel. So for example, if I've seen you on TikTok 50 times, and now when I'm scrolling on YouTube, I see your face on a thumbnail, I'm more likely to click on that video purely because I recognize you. Or if you've been on a bunch of podcasts and now I'm scrolling on YouTube and I say, hey, I've seen that guy on a bunch of podcasts, I'm more likely to click on the thumbnail. Or as a very obvious example with celebrities, the reason their channels blow up so fast is just because of the recognizability factor. You recognize this person, you already know this person. So if you're scrolling on YouTube and you see a celebrity that you already know, you already recognize, you're more likely to click on that video because you already recognize them. Now you can control this one, the recognizability trust, by posting on other platforms, going on podcasts, writing books, whatever it is. But I don't recommend focusing on that one because it takes a lot of effort. Now you have to grow a TikTok channel or whatever it is. A lot of business gurus and stuff use this technique because it is quite effective. If I'm seeing this business guru constantly on TikTok or on Instagram, when I see their YouTube video pop up, I'm just more likely to click on it because I've just seen their face a bunch of times. And we have one more factor here that you can control. And this is the one for education that I really recommend you focus on and really dive into. This is authority trust. Authority trust comes from credentials, accolades, your profession, stuff like that. For example, if the video is, I teach you how to go viral, if I dive into my profession and accolades, it would be thumbnail designer teaches how to go viral, or YouTube expert teaches how to go viral, or graphic designer teaches how to make a viral thumbnail. Something like that. I'm using my authority in the title. Or let's say you're making a video about business and you're a millionaire from running a successful business. Video number 1, how to grow your business versus millionaire teaches how to grow your business. I'm going to trust the millionaire more than this random person. Now, sometimes it can come off as cheesy and stuff to, say it that obviously. And you can be a bit more like subliminal with it, but it really does work and it's an effective technique. Just as another example, how to get bigger biceps versus bodybuilder teaches how to get bigger biceps. I'm going to trust the professional bodybuilder more, obviously. So when you're trying to maximize views, you really want to focus on this authority. Why are you the right person to deliver this information? Or whoever this video revolves around, let's say you're not the one presenting the information, but you're interviewing someone that's presenting this information. Why are they the right person to tell this information? Why are they the right person to deliver this how-to deliver this tutorial? All right, let's look at the other 3 requirements and how you can get more views. All right, the next component is the verb. On one side of the scale is boring, and on the other side of the scale is exciting. And basically, like we talked about, you're either loss aversion or you'll gain motivation. And the more exciting verb you choose, the more views you'll get. But basically, you want to make your educational video sound more exciting. So if you're teaching something, how can you choose a word that's less boring and more exciting? By the way, I'll give some examples in this video as well. So the next thing is the noun. So you want to move from niche to known. The more niche your noun is, obviously, the less views that you'll get. Now, this also comes down to TAM, total addressable market, which is a thing to factor in with educational channels, depending on how you're monetizing your channel. If you sell something, a product, a service, whatever it is, then you might want to have actually less views because that might help you with your conversion. The more known it is, the more views you can get. So let's just take a brand as an example. If you make videos on email marketing, for example, and you talk about MailChimp, then MailChimp is going to be reasonably niche. You have to already know what MailChimp is. Whereas if you say email marketing, a lot more people will know what email marketing is than know what MailChimp is, or MailerLite, or Kit, or whatever platform. So basically, you want to move from niche to known in order to get more views. Now, like I said, this comes down again to your monetization strategy on your channel. If you run an agency, for example, where you help companies optimize their MailChimp funnel, you're probably going to get a higher conversion on the videos where you are talking about specifically MailChimp as the noun, instead of going broad with it and just saying email marketing. The last thing here is the difficulty. Basically, you just want to think, how can I make this sound more easy? The easier you make it sound, the more likely someone will click on it. If the video is how to lose 1 kilogram of fat in 30 days versus how to lose 1 kilogram of fat in 7 days, I'm more likely to click on the one that's in 7 days because it sounds easier to do. People are more likely to click on something that is easy to do. As humans, we are inherently inclined to use less energy. So whatever is easier to do is more appealing. Now, to make something easier, it's not actually just time. So there are a few different ways that you can make something sound easier. So I really sat and thought about, like, as humans, how can we make something easy? So what are the things that basically stops us from trying? So basically, what are the objections that someone will have for clicking on a video? So I came up with these 5 ways to make something sound more easy. The first one is time, like I mentioned. So let's just use the example, how to lose 1 kilogram of fat. Let's just use that as the basis here. If we use time, we want to have the smallest amount of time possible. So it would be in 1 week instead of in 1 month, or it could be overnight, or it could be fast. Basically, the way to make it sound easy is to have a small amount of time. The next thing that we could do to make something sound easy to do would be skill. So it would be for beginners or no experience required. Something like that, where we're tapping into the skill level. And the less skill required to do it, the more easy it sounds to do, which makes sense. The next thing is cost, so money. So how to lose 1 kilogram of fat. So instead of a $1,000 per month membership, it's a $10 per month membership. So how to lose 1 kilogram of fat for $10. That's a lot more appealing than how to lose 1 kilogram of fat for $1,000. The next thing here is guarantee. So how can you make this sound so easy that it's pretty much guaranteed? Well, often that comes down to having, a unique mechanism, having something that makes it sound like so obvious that it's going to happen. So that could be with this blueprint, with this one trick, using the etc. framework, step by step, guide, stuff like that. Those kind of words that make it sound guaranteed, that makes it sound so easy and formulaic to do, that will help in making the how-to sound easy. And the last thing to make something sound easy is the mental aspect. So maybe it's no stress, or maybe it's whilst having fun. Something like that makes it sound easier to do. So how to lose 1 kilogram of fat whilst having fun, or whilst eating whatever you want, where you're making it sound mentally very easy to do. Now, I couldn't decide if I was going to include this or not, because now it goes even deeper, but what you can do is really understand the psychology of your target audience and understand the objection handling that you have to do. So, for example, let's just take, again, the losing 1 kilogram of fat. What is the typical objection that someone would have to that premise? That is the thing that you probably want to put in the title. Now, probably for each video, you'll want to test out different objections, but you really want to understand what are the things here that is holding someone back from doing it, or from just clicking on the video. So for me, for example, I can't bother buying equipment. It's expensive and stuff like that. So that comes down to cost. So if I saw the title, How to Lose 1 Kilogram of Fat, my objection is going to be, well, I don't want to spend money and buy a bunch of equipment. So then a good objection handling to make this sound easier would be how to lose 1 kilogram of fat without buying equipment, or with no equipment, or at home, or on your sofa, or something like that. That would be tackling the deep down objection that I have for clicking on that video. And the more you understand your audience, like the deep down psychology of your target audience, the better objection handling you can have in your title, aka making it sound easier. And we'll just do my channel as an example. If I made a video called How to Increase CTR on Your Gaming Channel, that's my idea. And I'm like, you know what? I want to get more views on this. How can I do that? Again, we're going to look at these 4 requirements here and just try to maximize the views. So right now it's just how to. Why do I trust this person? There's no reason to trust that this person's going to deliver good information. So maybe it's YouTube expert shows how to increase CTR on your gaming channel. I'm more likely to click on this video because I know why this person here is delivering that information. The next part here is verb. So increase. That's kind of boring. Increase CTR. That doesn't sound super exciting. We want to make it sound more exciting. Maybe it's explode your CTR or skyrocket your CTR. Something like that sounds more exciting. It sounds like it's having a much larger impact. How to skyrocket CTR on your gaming channel. That's a much better title now. Now let's look at the noun. So the noun is gaming channel. Gaming channel is quite niche. You have to be running a gaming channel. So what we could do, if I want to get more views on this video idea, is we just go more broad with it. So it's just becoming more known. So that would be something like how to increase CTR on any YouTube channel. Now, any person who runs a YouTube channel could find this video interesting. It's not just people who run a gaming channel. And now lastly, the difficulty level. So how to increase CTR on your gaming channel. We're not even saying how easy it is. It might be extremely difficult to do this. So we want to imply in the title here that this is going to be very easy to do. So we would think about our target audience here and think about the objections that they might have. What are they going to presume here? They might presume this is going to take a lot of time and I just don't have that much time right now. I'm just doing this gaming channel thing on the side. So if they're presuming it's going to take a lot of time, how do I make that sound very easy? I might say in 1 minute. I might say in 2 clicks, for example. Something like that. We're making it sound very easy to do. So now it's how to increase CTR on your gaming channel in 2 clicks. So that's a much better title already. And now for me to maximize my views, to get as many views as possible on this video, I'm basically going to combine all of these changes that we just did. So now we went from how to increase CTR on your gaming channel to YouTube expert shows how to skyrocket CTR on any YouTube channel in 2 clicks. That video there can get a lot more views. Now, like I mentioned before, that's a pretty long title. And if your titles are becoming extremely long, what we're going to do in the second step of the craft process is to try and take some of those ingredients here in your title and basically just put them in the thumbnail instead. What is the goal of a thumbnail? Well, when you see a thumbnail, it's kind of 4 things that your brain goes through in order to decide on whether to click on it or not. And these 4 steps here that I found have made up basically the framework for what makes a good thumbnail. So the first step is to simply get the attention, and specifically get the attention of your target audience. That is the first thing that you need to do. Now I'll get into detail with all this stuff, but the first step here is just to get the attention of your target audience. The next goal of the thumbnail is to simply explain the premise. So step one, your brain is scouring YouTube. It's opened up the YouTube home app, or it's scrolling on the side of a video you're watching, and basically your eyes are just scanning. And now what it's doing, your brain is trying to decipher from just the thumbnail alone, what's this video about? That's all it's trying to figure out right now. So it's like, cool, here's the stuff, anything standing out, what's this video about? It's looking at it and it's happening so fast. So the second goal here of your thumbnail is just to explain the premise of the video. Okay, so now the third step. So basically, your eyes have been scanning on YouTube, and it's just deciphering all of these thumbnails. What's this video about? What's this video about? Now that it's seen a thumbnail that it understands the premise of, it's now asking, is this something that I care about? Is this something that I want answered? So you might have heard of a curiosity gap or an open loop, or there's a bunch of different terms for it. But basically the goal of your thumbnail here is to open a question and get you ruminating. Now this doesn't have to be, massive questions. What's the meaning of life? It can be something very small and very specific. What kind of screw should I use when hanging up a frame? But if that's a question that your target audience cares about and wants to find out, then they'll click on that video. So you need to ensure that your thumbnail here is opening up a question. And yes, I'm going to get into detail with all this stuff. So basically your eyes, they're scanning the YouTube homepage. It's trying to decipher, what are all these video premises? What are these videos about? Now it's seen a thumbnail and it's like, is this something I care about? Is this something that I want answered? The next thing is, can I trust this source? Can I trust this video to be the one to answer that question for me? So when I say open a question, it doesn't have to be, a how-to or a tutorial video. It can be an education or an entertainment. But in this last goal here for the thumbnail, your brain is just trying to decipher, is this video going to be a good source? Can I trust this video to provide the information and answer the question that I'm after? And if it fails any of those 4 goals, then you're not going to have an effective thumbnail. Now that we understand the goals of the thumbnail, in the next video, I'm going to talk about the framework, like the checklist that you go through to ensure that you have an effective thumbnail. Let's get into it. All right, now that we understand the 4 goals of a thumbnail, let's talk about the saw thumb framework. This is the framework here, the checklist that basically makes a good thumbnail in my opinion. I think if you ensure that every thumbnail meets these 4 requirements here, you're going to have a very effective thumbnail. So the first goal that we talked about for thumbnails is to get the attention. So what does a saw thumb do? Well, it stands out. So the first part of this framework here is to stand out. The next goal was to explain the premise. So the next step in the saw thumb framework here is to make it obvious. We want the video's premise to be obvious in a split second. And yes, I'm going to get into how you can achieve that as well. Your next goal of the thumbnail was to get them to create a question, to form a question, to get some curiosity, to open a open loop, etc. So how are we going to do that? Well, the next step in the saw thumb framework here is ruminate. When someone has a sore thumb, the first thing you start doing is ruminating. You start wondering, how did that happen? Does it hurt? You have all of these questions, you're ruminating. That is the next checklist here in the saw thumb framework. And then lastly, when your brain has deciphered the thumbnail, the last thing it's wondering is, can I trust this source? So the last item here in the saw thumb framework is Earnest. When you see a sore thumb, you're wondering, is this real? Is this earnest? They are the 4 checklist items in what makes a good thumbnail. To some of you, this might sound kind of boring. To others of you, this might sound really exciting because it opens up a lot of possibilities. We're not saying, the thumbnail has to be this aspect ratio and you have to be in the corner and it has to have this logo and you have to have this amount of elements in the thumbnail and all of this stuff. They are simply just tactics, and there are so many examples of thumbnails that do so well on YouTube that don't follow those rules. Whereas every single thumbnail that I've gone through that has been successful follows these 4 criteria here. It stands out. It is obvious what the video is about. You can easily understand that premise. The thumbnail gets you ruminating. You start asking questions, and it's earnest to the video and earnest to the channel. Every single successful thumbnail that I've seen follows these 4 criteria here. All right, let's really dive into these 4 criteria here before we get into the designing stage, which is the craft process. But first, let's just get a really good understanding of this saw framework, because there are some checklist items that you can go through for each of these just to ensure that your thumbnail is actually achieving all of these goals, that it is standing out, that it is obvious what the video is about, that it is causing someone to ruminate, that it is genuinely an earnest thumbnail and it's, not clickbait. I've come up with checklist items for all of these four, so let's go through it. All right, let's talk about the S part of the Saw Thumb framework, which is stand out. Now, you might be thinking, and this is what most people think of when they hear stand out, they're like, cool, bright red colors. Let's have it blue, yellow, and red, and it's just popping off the screen, and then we'll have contrast, and we'll have shadows, and we'll have everything in a bold font. That isn't what stand out means. That advice can work, but it's probably going to work for a younger demographic. If you're making videos to an older demographic, they're not going to click on a bright red, blue, and yellow thumbnail that says wow with an exclamation mark on it. But people look to these biggest creators, and often the biggest creators are targeting a younger demographic. People look at what works for their channel and think that those tactics will work for every single channel. But that's not how it works. I actually tested this on my channel. The thumbnails that have a blue background and, bright colors and stuff, they did exceptionally worse, so much worse. And I think we will kind of know this deep down because otherwise everyone would just make a red thumbnail or a blue thumbnail or, put an exclamation mark in the thumbnail. We all know that that stuff doesn't actually work. Otherwise everyone would do it and every single video we post would be successful. So I think deep down we all know that that's just tactics that people throw around. So let's talk about what actually makes you stand out. If you're not standing out with bright colors or bold fonts and stuff like that, how do we actually stand out? Well, you need to understand what you're standing out from. So the YouTube algorithm is extremely smart and it understands someone pretty quickly. So when I go on YouTube, I'm going to see all the stuff that I'm interested in. I'm going to see business stuff, design stuff. I'm going to see travel stuff. They're the videos that YouTube knows that I like. And YouTube's algorithm is going to show you the stuff that you're interested in. So you're not trying to stand out, insert creator here that is mass appeal and gets 50 million views per video. You're not trying to stand out from them. You're trying to stand out on your target audience's home feed. So this comes down to understanding your target audience. Who is your target audience? What do they watch? Meaning, what kind of videos are they seeing on their home feed? If you run a cooking channel, your target audience is probably watching a ton of cooking videos. You're probably not the only cooking channel that they watch. So when they open up their home feed and they're seeing 20, 30 different thumbnails here, you're not trying to stand out from the Mr. Beasts or the Ryan Trahans or the Alex Hormozis or whoever. So your goal when you're trying to stand out is not through saturation, contrast, big bold text, looking shocked in the thumbnail and having, a question mark or whatever. That's not the way you stand out. You stand out by doing the opposite of what your niche is doing. Now, just doing the opposite for the sake of it isn't going to be effective. You still have to meet all the other criteria, but this is a very, very effective way in getting someone's attention. If your target audience opens up YouTube and they see 19 thumbnails that all look the same, but yours looks very different, the eye will naturally be drawn to it because it stands out. So you're standing out in your niche. You're not trying to stand out from every single video ever created in history. You're trying to stand out from your niche because the YouTube algorithm is very, very smart. So it's showing your target audience the videos that they want to see. So if the YouTube algorithm believes that your channel would be a good fit for them, and the algorithm thinks, I think this channel over here would be really good for this person, you'll be showing up on their feed with all of your competitors. So all the other channels that do similar stuff, because that's what the algorithm knows that they are interested in. I open up YouTube, I see all of the business channels. I open up YouTube, I see all of the YouTube growth channels, and I see all of these travel channels. So if you're a travel channel and you're just fitting into the mold of what a travel channel thumbnail looks like, you're going to have it more difficult to stand out. It's going to be a lot easier to just do the opposite. Now, the people who implement this tactic of trying to stand out from their niche, they implement this and then the other people follow. So one person does it and then everyone else follows. You've seen this countless times. You've seen this with Emma Chamberlain, everyone copies. Casey Neistat, everyone copies. Mr. Beast, everyone copies. So at first, Casey Neistat is unique and doing something different. Emma Chamberlain is doing something unique and different. Alex Hormozi is doing something unique and different. Mr. Beast is doing something unique and different. But then everyone starts doing it, so now all of a sudden it's popular. So now when everyone looks like this, you're trying to find the next new thing to stand out. You want to be one step ahead of what everyone else is doing. See what your niche is doing, see what the niche industry standard is, what that thumbnail looks like, do the opposite. But bear in mind, it still has to meet all of these other tick boxes Because if it doesn't actually meet these tick boxes, then you're just doing the opposite for the sake of it. Let's say your video idea is, I go on the tallest roller coaster in the world. And then your thumbnail is just a picture of an orange. Yes, technically then you are doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing, but it's not going to be very effective. So you want to find a way to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing whilst still meeting these other tick boxes. And that's a really difficult thing to do. And it's a lot easier for me, and I'm probably incentivized to just say, hey guys, you got this, use saturation and you'll do great. And that would make a very inspiring video, but it's not actually going to help you. It's not going to get you results. To do well on YouTube requires strategy, and it requires picking up on these trends. So when the crowd is up here doing whatever's popular, if you can be one step ahead and doing the unpopular thing, that will really help you out. And you've probably seen these waves on YouTube. You have super hyper edited thumbnails. Okay, the next thing is super boring, simple looking thumbnails. You have super low key videos that are barely edited and are authentic. And now the next thing is super edited. These trends come in waves and you want to be one step ahead. And that requires you looking at your niche, studying your niche, and just realizing, how can I stand out? And I'm presuming you're watching this because you came from my YouTube channel. So just to use my own channel as an example, the average thumbnail for a YouTube growth is very overly edited and like extreme. I don't know how to put it. Yeah, like overly edited and extreme and like over the top. So I just did the opposite. In most of my thumbnails, it's just me next to a computer screen. Now my thumbnails only work because it meets these other tick boxes as well. If it didn't meet this other stuff, then it would be a bad thumbnail. But I've managed to find a way to look at what the average YouTube growth thumbnail is and just kind of do the opposite. And because everything goes in waves where people are trying to stand out, the next thing in a few years or months or weeks, whenever it will happen, will be the YouTube growth space having very minimalist thumbnails. So the first thing in the SOAR framework here is to stand out. And it's to stand out in your niche. Look at your niche. Look at what the average thumbnail looks like in your niche. Is there a way that you can stand out whilst still meeting these other requirements? Speaking of, let's get to the next step here in the SOAR framework. All right, the next step in the SOAR framework is obvious. This is, I think, the thing that holds most people back with thumbnails. I have now gone through so many channels that are small channels and really struggling, and the most common mistake I see by far is it's just not obvious what the premise is. When you're scrolling through YouTube, your brain is just scanning so quickly and trying to decipher, what is this video about? And if it doesn't immediately understand what the video is about, then it's not going to bother reading the title, which makes sense. If you open up YouTube and you had to read every single title, your brain would be exhausted. You'd be reading a book every single time you open the app. And your brain is wired to understand images much faster than it is to read text. So if when the brain sees an image and it doesn't immediately understand what it is, then it's not going to think, you know what, I'll still read the title, I'll give it the time of day, because it's just trying to decipher information quickly. And if it doesn't think that information is relevant and going to provide value, then it's just going to move on. So the obvious part of the SOAR framework here is just, how can you explain the video's premise as quickly as possible? This is so important, and it's the first step in the craft process when you're designing a thumbnail, and I'll get to that. But I have a few tick boxes that I like to ask myself when designing a thumbnail to ensure that the video's premise is actually obvious. So the first tick box here is just asking, is this thumbnail using the fewest elements as possible? Your brain is trying to decipher an image, is trying to understand what's happening. And the more stuff that's in that image, the more brain power and energy is going to be used to try and understand what's happening. So your goal here is just to use the least amount of elements possible in order to deliver that information. As you can tell, I go a lot into psychology and all of that stuff, because there really are like fundamental core principles behind thumbnail design. Thumbnail design is just understanding psychology. As humans, we are incentivized to use the least amount of energy possible. And if someone's trying to deliver a piece of information to you, which a thumbnail is, it's just trying to deliver the premise to you, your brain will want the simple explanation, as it involves less thinking, less, figuring out. And since right now you have an abundance of content to consume, you're not going to want to decipher every single piece of content and what it could mean and all of that. That's just going to be so much for the brain. So it's just scanning through and trying to find the most relevant thing that actually provides value as quickly as possible. The next tick box here in ensuring the thumbnail is obvious what the premise is looking at the background. If the background in your thumbnail isn't providing more context on what the video is about, then just have it simple. Just have like a black background or a white background or anything that doesn't blend in with what the foreground is. If your video's premise is more understood with the background, then fine, you might want to consider having a detailed background. In 90% of cases, the background isn't providing more context, in which case do not have anything in the background. And if you do need something in the background, just make sure that it's standing out from the foreground. The next tick box I'll breeze over. It's just, is the text legible? This is a mistake I've seen on quite a few small channels, so I just wanted to mention it quickly. If your text can't be easily read, then it's not obvious what the video is because the text is difficult to read. So just make sure your text is legible. I just wanted to mention it quickly because so many small channels are making this mistake. The next tick box that I go through is kind of actually to do with the first tick box. So the first tick box is ensuring you're using the fewest amount of elements as possible. In this next point here, I just want to ensure that every element is as large as possible. Having white space or blank space in your thumbnail is great, but you really want to ensure every item is as large as possible, as long as it's not clashing or overlapping or difficult to decipher, aka obvious what the video's premise is. But you do want to ensure that every item is as large as possible. Because what most of us do, especially me, I work in Photoshop, we're designing everything and we're seeing everything, by the pixel. But that's not how people are going to see your thumbnail. They're going to see it as very, very small. And because they're seeing your thumbnail as a very tiny image, you want to ensure that every item takes up as much space in the thumbnail as possible. The next tick box here is just, does it fit in the safe space of the thumbnail? I have a free download in the course here of just a PNG that you can drag into Canva or Photoshop or whatever you're designing into, just to ensure that all the items in your thumbnail aren't being covered up or anything like that. So they are the tick boxes that I go through to ensure that the video's premise is obvious. Then I have 2 tests that I like to do. And these tests here are just, again, to ensure that the video's premise is obvious. You might have heard this first technique before. It's pretty common, but it's really useful. You just want to look at your thumbnail for a split second. Just flash it for like 1 second or even less. And in that split second there, do you immediately understand what the video's premise is? If it's not immediately obvious, then it's not going to be a very effective thumbnail because the brain is just scanning and it's giving it a split second. And in that split second there, it's trying to understand what the video's premise is. Now, what you can do if you're working next to someone or someone's in the house, show someone your thumbnail for 1 second. Open up your thumbnail, have it open, have it close very quickly. And ask them, hey, what do you think this video is about? If they say a premise that's not correct, then you know your thumbnail isn't explaining visually what the video's premise is. I do this and I get some really interesting insights because obviously, when I'm designing it, I'm like, this is very obvious what it's about. But when you show someone who has no idea what your video is and no idea what the video is about and they've never seen your thumbnail before, when they see that thumbnail for a split second and they guess the premise, sometimes they are just way off, which means, okay, cool, I need to go back to the drawing board here because clearly I'm not explaining the video's premise very well. Now, if you don't have someone to show the thumbnail to, that's okay. I will give you the ChatGPT prompt that I use. Basically, in this prompt here, I'm just asking ChatGPT, what do you think this video is about? And it's going to guess what the video's premise is. Now, if it's guessing the wrong premise, you've done a pretty bad job. Now, I don't find this as effective as doing the split second test with someone because then they're only seeing it for, a split second. Whereas with ChatGPT, it stays there, but ChatGPT is working very fast. It's working in a split second. So it's kind of having a similar effect. The second thing that I mentioned there is the blur test. What you can do is just blur the thumbnail and show that to someone and say, what do you think this premise is? If the blurred thumbnail isn't very obvious, then maybe your thumbnail is too busy. There's too many elements. Maybe the background has too much stuff going on. That's why I find doing this blur test here quite effective because if everything is blending together and it's difficult to understand when it's blurred, then maybe the thumbnail isn't explaining the video's premise as well as you think. I think a lot of people make the mistake in thinking that people spend a lot of time looking at thumbnails, and that's just not the case. When someone opens up YouTube, they are scanning so quickly. They're not looking at every single thumbnail and being like, I wonder what this premise is. Let me read the title. Who posted this? How many views does it have for every single video? It's just scanning quickly. Which one grabs the attention? And the brain is getting drawn to the one that stands out from the niche. And then the brain in a millisecond is wondering, what's this video about? And if it doesn't immediately answer that, it's like, I'll move on to the next one. Because there's a billion different videos to choose from. So it's not going to give you the time of day. And because there's so much competition, you have to do a very good job. Back in the day on YouTube, it wasn't as difficult as it is now. There was just less supply. There was less videos. Now there's so many videos. There's so much competition. And every person can watch a million different videos on every single niche that they're interested in. Back in the day, there might have been 3 videos about Dungeons and Dragons. So the competition just wasn't there. Whereas nowadays there is so much competition for attention, so you really have to dial this stuff in. Now the next test that I do to ensure the video's premise is obvious is the zoom test. I simply zoom out of the thumbnail. Like I mentioned, when we're designing it, we're up close in the thumbnail and we're seeing every single pixel. Zoom out. If it's difficult to understand the thumbnail when it's small, people won't click on it. So doing the split-second test or the blur test, or both if you want, and doing the zoom out test here, they are really useful tests to ensure that your video's premise is obvious. The next thing is ruminate. We want to ensure that the thumbnail causes someone to ruminate. So let's go through it in the next video. Alright, the next factor here in an effective thumbnail is ruminate. Now when I wrote draft 1 of this course, I realized that the goal of the thumbnail isn't actually to cause someone to ruminate. It's actually the goal of the packaging. And that's, another reason that I started writing the title. I just realized it's not the thumbnail that causes someone to ruminate. It's the video's premise that causes someone to ruminate. If you have a good video premise, and that has been executed really well in the title, and if that video's premise is very obvious in the thumbnail, so the O part in the SAW framework, then you should already be ruminating. So let's just say, as an example, you do email marketing, and the video's premise is how to double your conversion on your email marketing overnight. That's the video's premise. If the thumbnail has been designed well, and if this title is visually explained in the thumbnail, then I'm already ruminating, because that's an interesting premise. I want to know, how do I double my conversion in my email marketing overnight? So the thumbnail isn't actually causing the curiosity. It's the video's premise that causes the ruminating, that causes you to form questions. But with that being said, there are different ways to accentuate that curiosity and accentuate that ruminating in the thumbnail. And that's what I'll go through in this video. But I wanted to make it very clear that the thumbnail won't cause someone to ruminate. It will be the video's premise that will cause someone to ruminate. And if you've successfully done the O part of the SAW framework, which is make it obvious, then someone should already be ruminating when they see that thumbnail. But with that being said, there are some sneaky ways, tactics, that you could implement in order to get someone to ruminate even more. Now this isn't all of them, but these are the ones that I've found to be most effective. The first one is unclear imagery. Stuff like blurs and pixels. This can be an effective way to cause some extra rumination. Like I said, the video's premise alone should cause you to ruminate, to open up some questions, and to basically form a question that you're like, I want this answered. But one way to make that even more powerful would be to blur and stuff and to pixelate objects. Another thumbnail design technique that you could use is the mid-action. So this would be having pause moments, or maybe using a screenshot. This here looks like I'm seeing the thing mid-action. This can accentuate this rumination. The next one here is kind of cheesy, and some of you might think it's tacky, and I totally get that. But, it does work. Stuff like exclamation marks, question marks, stuff like that in a thumbnail. It's not always the best idea. It can come off kind of cheap and cheesy or whatever. But I've seen thumbnails where this does work. Again, like I've said, the goal of the title is to get someone to ruminate. And if you are visually explaining that and making it obvious, then that should be causing the ruminating. These are just small extra stuff that you can do to cause someone to ruminate. These are just extra tactics that you could implement. But if your thumbnail requires a question mark or an exclamation mark in order to make it work, it's not a good thumbnail. These are just like extra small stuff. If you think adding a question mark will be the thing that makes a good thumbnail, then you don't have a very good video premise. Alright, the next tactic here to cause some rumination is to do something negative, such as tension, contradiction, disagreement, stuff like that. For example, if you have a podcast, instead of having both of the guests smiling, you would have one smiling and one angry, and there's a bit of disagreement. That's just more interesting. It causes some rumination. Why are they arguing? I wonder what happened. What did one of them say? It just gets the mind going and opens up some questions. Again, that's just a tactic. Don't fall back on that being the answer to going viral. In that same vein, the next thing here is expressions. Just picking a good facial expression if you have a face in the thumbnail, obviously, and just ensuring that it's the right facial expression for whatever the video's premise is about. Different facial expressions will cause someone to ruminate more or less, and it really depends on your video's premise. So just think, for your video's premise, what would be the best facial expression just to get someone ruminating more? Again, that really just comes down to making it obvious what the video's premise is. And then we have exaggeration. So this could be stuff like, adding fire in the background when you're doing a roast video or something like that, where basically you're just exaggerating whatever the premise is. But again, this just comes down to, once again, Are you visually explaining the premise in your thumbnail? And using exaggeration in your thumbnail can just be like a small extra thing to cause some ruminating. Now for Ruminate here, there are tests that I do to ensure that it's actually causing someone to ruminate. The first one here is answered. Have you ensured that you're not giving away the answer in the thumbnail? You can sometimes give away part of an answer, and that can kind of be interesting, but you don't want to give away the full answer. If we take the same example from before of how to double your conversion on your email marketing. If you gave away the exact answer in the thumbnail, why would I click on the thumbnail? You've just told me the answer. And I see this mistake more with educational videos than entertainment videos, but sometimes entertainment videos do this as well. But honestly, it's more the educational channels who are making this mistake. Just make sure you're not giving away the answer exactly in the thumbnail, because then why would I click on it? You've already told me the answer. You've already delivered the value, with the value being lessons learned. So I've already learned my lesson without clicking on your video. Speaking of value, the next test that I do is the value of the video visually clear? So when I say value, I'm not talking about premise right now. I'm talking about the actual value. So for education, it's loss aversion or gain motivation. Is that clear in the thumbnail? Or if you're in entertainment, it's the movie genre. Is it clear that it's an action video? Is it clear that it's a comedy video? You want to make it clear, because if I don't understand that, then I'm not going to be ruminating. I'm not going to, open up these questions. If your video's premise is that you traveled to the top of a mountain and it's an adventure video, if it's not obvious that it's an action/adventure video, I'm not going to ask any questions. You want someone, when they see this thumbnail, to immediately understand this is an adventure video. How did they pull this off? What happened? All of these different questions that they have. But if the value of the video isn't obvious, then I'm not going to start ruminating. If this is a comedy video, you want to make that visually understood. Now that doesn't mean you want to have a laughing face emoji in the thumbnail so someone's like, hey, that's a laughing face emoji. This is a comedy video. You want to do that more naturally. And I do think comedy is the most difficult of the genres to achieve that in, whereas other genres, it is more obvious. But even small stuff like the font choice, the color scheme, the facial expression, all of those small stuff will help me to understand what type of value is this video bringing to me? Because if I understand that, then I'm going to start ruminating about the right questions. And that's what we want here in this step, someone to start ruminating, to start asking questions. Because when they have these questions that are unanswered, that's when they're going to click. Cool, I hope you found that useful. Opening up these open loops and causing someone to have these unanswered questions, that's going to get someone to click. And it's really the title's goal to do that. And if you've done a good job in making it very obvious what the video's premise is, then that should be achieved. These methods that I went through in this video are simply just small extra stuff that you can do to cause someone to ruminate even more. Hope that helped. Let's go through the last letter in the SAW framework, which is E, standing for earnest. All right, the last step here in the SAW framework is E for earnest. Basically, at this stage, someone is wondering, can I trust this video? They scan YouTube. You got their attention, so you've stood out. Now in a millisecond, the brain is trying to understand, do I get this premise? Do I understand the premise of this video? And if you've done a good job of that, you've achieved the second step of making it obvious. The next step here, the brain is asking, do I care about this? It's going to start opening up all of these questions. It's going to have these unanswered questions. And the only way for someone to answer those questions is to click on the video. So now you've got them to ruminate. The last step here is just showing, yeah, this is an earnest video. You can trust this video. You can trust this source here. Now, this is basically for someone figuring out, is this clickbait or is this going to be a bad video, basically? So there's a few different questions that I like to ask myself with the thumbnail. The first one is it earnest to you, to your channel? Because if it doesn't fit your style and your vibe, it's just not coming across as earnest and you're not going to trust the video. If a creator that you followed for a while posts a video that's just completely, left field, you're not going to trust it. You're going to think this is incredibly unearnest. Why have they posted this? I'm not going to click on this. This just seems unlike them. So you won't click on it, or you're less likely to click on it. Now, if you're a small channel, you don't have to worry about this as much, to be honest. This is more for larger channels. At the start, you can experiment and stuff because no one's expecting you to do a certain thing or your thumbnails to look a certain way or your videos to look a certain way or be a certain way or edit in a certain way. People aren't expecting that from you just yet. But as you get larger, your fans are expecting a certain thing from you because you've been delivering them a specific value. So if you now have a completely weird different title or a weird different thumbnail, it might not seem earnest, which means someone might be less likely to actually click on that video. The next one here is really vital to understand. Is it earnest to your target audience? If it doesn't seem genuine to your target audience and it seems clickbaity to them, they're not going to click. Just as an extreme example, if we take my channel, for example, if I made a video called how to get 1 million views on your first post, it might not seem that earnest to your target audience. They'll think this person's clearly lying to me. That just seems unrealistic. And if the thumbnail is me with a shocked face and, an explosion of the YouTube logo or whatever, it's not going to seem very earnest to your target audience. Your target audience won't trust that. Even if it is earnest to my channel, even if all my thumbnails had that style and it was earnest to me as a creator, if it doesn't seem authentic and earnest to your target audience, then they won't click on it. The next thing to ask here is it earnest to the video itself? So you could design the most beautiful thumbnail, the most optimized thumbnail ever, but if someone then clicks on the video, it's just a complete mismatch on the actual content. That's just clickbait. So you have to ensure that the thumbnail is actually earnest to the video itself. So right now, as you can hear, you have to make sure that it's earnest to your channel style, it's earnest to your audience, and now that it's earnest to the video itself. So you really have to focus on being earnest and authentic and not clickbait. And then the last way that we as YouTube users decide if a video is earnest is it professionally designed? Because what we're doing when we're scrolling through YouTube is trying to decide, is this video going to be valuable to me? Is this video actually going to deliver on the promise that it's saying in the title? And a very quick way that we judge as humans, whether that's a good or a bad thing, a very quick way that we judge if a video is going to do that is with the thumbnail. And if it doesn't look professional, if it looks bad, then we're going to presume that the video is bad as well. Poorly designed, bad looking thumbnail often will mean bad, poorly edited, not a very good video. The more professional your thumbnail looks, the more we presume that the video itself is going to be good. So I like to just have these tick boxes here to ensure that it's meeting all of these requirements. Because if it's falling short on one of them, then you're going to be sacrificing views for that. All right, that is the last step here in the SOAR framework. We have standout, we have obvious, we have ruminate, and we have earnest. If your thumbnail is meeting those 4 requirements here, then you have a good thumbnail. Now, those 4 things, you might think, hey, that sounds pretty overwhelming. That's a lot of things to achieve. Well, if you think so, don't worry. In the next module, we are going to go through the craft process. This is the process that I use for designing thumbnails, and it has helped me so much in making effective thumbnails that meet these 4 requirements of standing out, making it obvious, ruminating, and being earnest. Thank you for watching. Let's get into the next part of the course. All right, the first step in the craft process is the Caveman Game. This is, I think, the most fun step. Depends, you might like the fine-tuning step the most, but for me, I like the Caveman Game a lot. It's just a very fun way of trying to figure out what you should have in the thumbnail. So like we've talked about, humans decipher and understand images very, very quickly, a lot faster than we can read and understand text. So ideally, what you want to do is visually describe in a few drawings what your video is about. What is the video's premise? You want to do that in a few drawings, just like a caveman would. So back in the day, cavemen would draw on their cave walls, the stories and lessons and stuff like that on a cave wall. And they would do that with just icons. So this is what you're going to do. So cavemen were trying to visually show a story or a piece of information with icons. And that's exactly what you're trying to do. In your thumbnail, you are just trying to visually show your story or your information, so the video's premise, you are visually trying to show that with icons. So what I'll do is jump into Canva Draw here and play the Caveman Game. All right, so let's play the Caveman Game. This worksheet here, it is available for free in the course. You can download it. You can either drop it into Canva Draw, Illustrator, or something like that, and you can just draw like I'm going to do here. Or if you want, you can print it out and do it by hand if you prefer. That way you can do it on the computer or by hand, whatever you prefer. So what we're going to do here is play the Caveman Game. We're going to use these 2 examples from before. How to grow indoor plants without any sunlight. So here we have that. That is the title. So you'll write that down. And now we'll play the Caveman Game. So we'll do it in these different columns here. How would a caveman try and get this point across here? How to grow indoor plants without any sunlight. The main things here that I have to get across: indoor, plants, and without sunlight. They're the main things that I really have to get across here. How could I do this? The first one is just different ways of saying indoor. So a house is an obvious one. A bedroom, that's my bed. A bedroom and a living room. So this here is my very terrible drawing of a sofa. Okay, so now I've gotten across here indoor. A house, a bed, and a sofa. Plants, I guess it would just be different plants. So, okay, here's my plant. That's a rose, I guess, or something. As you can tell, you do not have to be good at drawing here. All we're trying to do is understand which visual element do we need to show. This here is going to be my Monstero. Is that what a Monstero look like? Something like that. That's awful. These drawings are terrible, but that's the point. It doesn't matter if this looks bad, by the way. This isn't an art competition. You're just trying to do this as quickly as possible. Indoor, plants, and now without sunlight. Without sunlight. I guess a window with curtains. So here's my window with curtains. That's an awful drawing. Then the sun, that's my sun, and that would be crossed out, so no sun. And then let's just do one, which is text. So let's just say no sunlight. Like I've said, it's not ideal to use text. You can if you have to, just because the brain is faster at processing images than it is at reading text. But of course, if you have something that is very difficult to get across in a drawing, then you can have text. If you are going to have text, do not have more than 3-4 words at most. The less, the better. No sunlight here is a very short way of saying it. If I had said here without any sunlight, that's just making that longer than it needs to be. So now from these different rows here, I have my 3 different thumbnails that I can ABC test. We have this one, which is a house, we have a plant, and we have the curtains closed. We have a bedroom, we have a plant, and we have the sun crossed out. We have the sofa, we have whatever Monstero or plant this is, and the words no sunlight. So we are visually describing what this video is about. Let's do it for one more example, just so you can see how it works. We have how to start a podcast for $0 full guide. Now, I wanted to show you an example of using AI because this, for me, I've been a graphic designer for a very long time. I've designed very many thumbnails. So for me, this comes quite naturally. I find this quite easy to do. But if this is a very new concept for you, and maybe you haven't played a lot of drawing games, or you just don't draw that much, clearly you can see that I don't draw that much either. But if you're struggling with this, then I'll show you the AI prompt that I use, which can give you some inspiration. So this here is the AI prompt that I'm going to use. So the title for this video is How to Start a Podcast for $0 Full Guide. In the video, and here you just want to describe what the video is about very quickly. In the video, I basically show how to start a podcast using only your phone to record and edit, all for free. With the title and thumbnail, brackets packaging, needing these 4 requirements. Who is the character of the story? For this video, it's an audio engineer. What is the verb of this story? In this video, it is start. What is the main noun? It is podcast. And what is the difficulty of this level for this video? It is for $0. So here we've broken down all of that for the AI. And then we have what are the 3 combinations of icon/elements/text, only 1 or 2 words, that could visually explain this premise. Like if someone was trying to draw out this video's premise on a piece of paper as quick as possible. For example, if the video was professional chef tries the 10-pound sushi challenge, and then I've just given it some examples here of how this works. So here's what it's going to come up with. Number 1, audio engineer wearing headphones. Element number 2, smartphone with a recording waveform on the screen. And element 3, the words $0. Then we have audio engineer speaking into a phone like a microphone. Element 2, podcast cover art icon. That's interesting. And the element, the words start today. Lastly, audio engineer looking surprised/shocked. Element number 2, phone with an editing timeline displayed. I quite like that. And element 3, the words no mic needed. That is really, really good. So as you can see from this ChatGPT prompt here, we got all of this information here. And this here is honestly, pretty much perfect. So what I'll do is just now draw these out. So the first one here is audio engineer. That's me or an audio engineer with headphones. That's terrible. We have a phone with audio recording. I'm so bad at drawing. And then the text for $0. Then we have a guy talking into a phone. So let's say he's holding the phone, holding it. There we go. And he's talking into it. And then the text start today. And then lastly, audio engineer, we'll give him headphones again. That's looking shocked. Then the phone with the editing timeline. So that's my drawing of an editing timeline. And the text no mic. So here what we've done is the Caveman Game using our own brain, and then we've done the Caveman Game using AI. Both are good, both work very well. As you can see, AI does a pretty good job. This prompt here is in the course. You can just copy and paste it. Hope you find it useful. I spent quite a bit of time trying to perfect the prompt just so it actually gives you good ideas because the first iterations of the prompt were terrible, but I think this here does a really good job. So that is the C part of the craft process, which is the Caveman Game. In the next video, I'm going to show you the R part of craft, which is the requirements, which is this bit here. Okay, let's get into it. All right, the next part of the craft process is the requirements. So in the first module, when we were writing our titles, some of you might have realized that your titles are becoming quite long, and that's totally okay. And that's what we're going to work on in this step here. In the requirements part, we're just going to look at all of the different requirements for the title, and if the title is too long, which elements of the title can we put into the thumbnail instead? Basically, these requirements here need to belong in your packaging. So the packaging is the combination of your thumbnail and title. So if your title is too long, just ensure, is it being visually described in the thumbnail? So we'll take a look at that in this video with 2 examples. So let's have a look at this requirement step. So these 2 here, the titles actually aren't that long. We have how to grow indoor plants without any sunlight. That's a pretty short and succinct title. That's okay. That doesn't need shortening. And we have how to start a podcast for $0 full guide. That one too isn't that long. I think that's a good length. So what I did here was just use 2 other titles that we had from the course before. We had Vegetarian Survived the 2-Pound Steak Challenge. And what I did was just do quickly the Caveman Game for this title here. So we have a vegetarian looking very angry. And this here is a t-shirt with like a leaf icon. And then we have a steak, and then we have 2 pound. And then the other title, also from earlier in the course, is Undercover Chef Ranks 5-Star French Restaurants in Paris. That is a very lengthy title, so that definitely needs some work. And then for the Caveman Game, I have a chef here. That is a chef hat. We have 5-star, and we have a snail on a plate, snails being the very stereotypical French dish. So these 2 titles here are quite long. So the first thing that we're going to do is just ensure, do we have all of these different requirements in the title? So we have the who, which is vegetarian. Then we have the survives, which is the verb. We have the noun, which is steak, and we have the difficulty, challenge, and 2 pound. So all of these are good. We have all of these different elements in here. But since this is slightly too long, what in this title here can we cut and put in the thumbnail instead, which we'll do in the next step here of arrangement. We could cut vegetarian, and it's just I, but I think that should be in the title. Survives, we do need the verb in there. I think the best option here would be to cut the 2 pound. So survives steak challenge, or the steak challenge. So maybe we'll just cut the word 2 pound. And this is okay because we've got it here visually. So in this caveman drawing here, we can see a vegetarian, we can see a steak, and we can see this 2 pound here. So that's okay. That one's going to work fine for us. So what we'll do here is just say we need to visually include this here, and that's going to be 2 pound. So when we're working on the arrangement, which is the next step, we need to ensure that 2 pound here is showing up in the thumbnail because it's no longer going to be in the title. Hope that makes sense. In this other example here, this is very, very long. First, we'll just look at all these different requirements. Undercover chef, that is the who. Ranks, that is the verb. Noun is French restaurants. 5-star, and in Paris is the difficulty. What are we going to cut here? We couldn't cut undercover chef because we can see here that this is a chef. So if we change this to I rank 5-star French restaurants in Paris, that would work because we can see that this is a chef. So that's one option. Here are 5 stars, so we could cut 5 stars. So it's undercover chef ranks French restaurants in Paris. That's an option. French restaurants in Paris. Feel like that's kind of doubling up on the information, and it would make most sense to cut either French restaurants or in Paris. So undercover chef ranks 5-star dishes in Paris, or undercover chef ranks 5-star French restaurants. I think French restaurants, and I think here what we'll do is cut in Paris. So now it becomes undercover chef ranks 5-star French restaurants, which I quite like. So now we have to make sure that in Paris is being visually explained in the thumbnail. So right now from this caveman game here, it's not obvious that it's in Paris. We can see a snail and we're stereotypically going to think that's a French dish. So this is probably in France, but I want to show visually that it's in Paris, and that is not coming across here. So in the next step, we need to ensure that in Paris is showing up here in the arrangement. When we're arranging all of these items, we need to ensure that this item here is also showing up. Now, luckily for this other example, 2 pounds, that's already here. So we don't have to worry about that. I hope that makes sense and was useful. The requirements here in your packaging is a really important thing to think about because you don't want to have a title that is too long, but you still want to get across all of these different items here, all of these different requirements, the who, the verb, the noun, and the difficulty. Cool. Let's jump into the next video, which is all about the arrangement. All right, in the next step of the craft process, we have arrangement. Arrangement is basically how you're going to arrange all of these different elements. So in the Caveman game, we ensured that we have drawn out the different icons that we need to visually explain what the video's premise is. Now what we need to do is take these items and find the optimal arrangement to tell the story. So what we're going to do is just drag these drawings into our arrangement thumbnail. We're just going to take these items into a very, very simple sketch of the thumbnail so we know where all the elements should be. We are then going to be using this sketch as the background so I know where all of the elements should sit in the thumbnail. All right, let's jump into Canva Draw and go through some arrangement examples. All right, so for arrangement, all we're going to do is arrange these different items. So if you're working with columns here, this column here is going to become this arrangement. This column here is going to become this arrangement. Of course, you can mix and match if you prefer. If you want this drawing with this drawing, that's completely fine. We have the house, we have the plant, and then we have the windows. What we have to do here is just figure out what's the best arrangement of these items. I think the best way to do this would be the outside of the house, then we have the window, then a window seal, and that's a curtain here. And then here we have our plant. So that's our plant there. So now I can see the curtain, which is covering it up, and I can see the plants, and I can see this is a house. So that here is the first column of this arrangement. The next one here is the bed, the flower, and the sun crossed out. So I think what would the best way of doing this be? I think it would be the bed like this. So we have the bed like this. Then here is the nightstand with the plant. There we go. That's a really terrible drawing. And then here we have the sun with it being crossed out. So we are taking all of these elements here. And now you can understand purely from these thumbnails, you can understand what the video's premise is. Hey, look, there's a bed, there's a plant next to it. So it's how to grow an indoor plant without the sun. Like it's visually explaining it, which is exactly what we need. So that's what we're doing here in the arrangement step. This one is extremely self-explanatory, as you can imagine. We have the steak and we have the 2 pound. So if you put all of this together, it will look something like this. Cool, I can see a vegetarian, I can see a steak, and I can see 2 pound. So we're just putting this arrangement together here. But as you can see, this is how the arrangement step works. We're just taking all of the elements from the Caveman game and we're just putting them in here. Now for this one here, as you can see, we have to ensure that in Paris shows up as well. So I'll just very quickly drag that there and then put the 5-star up here. So let's just add a body to this guy. All right, so we have the chef, we have the snail, and we have the 5 stars. The last thing here that we need is in Paris. So that's one of the requirements that's missing. So luckily there is quite a bit of space here. So what we could do is, how would we do this? We might do a window, that, and then in the window, you can see the Eiffel Tower. That is my drawing of the Eiffel Tower. So now this here has all of the requirements that we need. So we've taken all the elements from the Caveman game, and we've also taken this missing item, which is in Paris, and put that in here, as you can see. So now we can see the Eiffel Tower in the window. For the next video, which is fine-tuning, I will use this here as the example. Like I've said, the photoshopping, yes, it's very fun. I'm a graphic designer. I love Photoshop, or if you're working in Canva or whatever, that stuff is very fun, but it is the 5%, 95% of the effort is going to come from just this here. Just understanding the psychology and the elements that you need in the thumbnail. But for the fine-tuning example, I will use this and try to make this here into a professional thumbnail. All right, welcome to the next step of the process, which is fine-tuning. So what you are going to do is simply copy and paste your drawing, however good or bad it is, into Photoshop or Canva, whatever you're using. Like I've said, if you're not great at photo editing, it really doesn't matter. And you don't need to do an expensive photo shoot either. A lot of people that I see talk about thumbnail design make it seem like you need to have the most professional photo shoot ever in order to do something like this. You definitely don't. We have so many great free tools out there that you can do this for free and pretty quickly. The first thing that I need for this video is this guy here, which is going to be me. I am the vegetarian. Now, instead of doing a complicated photo shoot, I'm just going to use Photo Booth. If you want, yes, you can go take professional photos. You can set up lighting, all of that. But since that stuff isn't the thing that's holding you back, most likely, I'm just going to do it in Photo Booth because I want to show you that this stuff can be done very easily and it's not the thing holding you back. So I'll just do some photos of me looking very angry. All right, we'll just use this one. I'll simply drag it in here. Now in Photoshop, there is this button here called Remove Background, and most of the time it does a pretty good job, as you can see. If you're not using Photoshop, Canva has a Remove Background feature. There's a bunch of free ones online. Removing backgrounds now is very, very easy. All right, the next thing that I need here is a stake or maybe just a table to put this on. So I have a few different websites that I like to use. Pexels is one of them. Unsplash is another. Vecteezy is another. Just check the licenses and stuff that you need for the images, but those are some of my go-to websites. So I'll just search for table here. Honestly, this one here is pretty good, to be honest. I just need this bit here. So I'll click on download and I'll drag this in and make that very large like this. It's pretty good. And I will copy this bit here. Copy and paste. All right, the next thing here that I need is a stake. So what I'm actually going to do is use a bit of AI magic. Just highlight this, maybe even larger. Let's do that. I'm going to click on contextual taskbar. And here I will write, add a plate with a massive stake on it. That one. I think that's the best one, to be honest. Looking at this, I actually think it'd be better to not have it on the plate. I think, can't decide, but I think that would be better. So what I'll do is just cut it out like this. All right, that is pretty good. And now the last thing here is £2. So what I'll do here is just do this manually. So I'll do that and have the text £2 and make that nice and large. All right, that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is just add some shadows and stuff to these. Now this here, honestly, this is like the 1% stuff. It helps a bit, but it's not the thing that's going to hold you back. I'll make this here a bit 3D as well with a bevel emboss, just something like that. Now it looks a bit more 3D. So we have me looking at the stake with £2. So what we've done is just use this here as our inspiration, and then we put this here. Now I need to ensure that it's obvious that I'm vegetarian. How are we going to do this? What we could do is cut out this table here like that, maybe. That's not bad. And then I'll put here, add a plant icon embroidered on to the t-shirt. Now what you could do to make this noun more known is use an icon that everyone recognizes, such as, a brand to do with vegetarianism. But let's say this one here, it's not terrible. What we'll do though is make it larger because it's just a bit too small. That there looks all right. I can't decide if that looks obvious enough that it's vegetarianism. So I found this icon here, which I quite like. That definitely looks like a vegan icon. Now, the last thing I'm going to do here is just fix, as you can see, this didn't get cut out too well. So I'll just do a bit more fine tuning. I'll add a bit of shadow here just by drawing underneath it and adding a blur to that. There we go. Now it doesn't look like it's floating in space. Now the last thing here is the background. So like I've talked about, you only want a busy background if it provides context. So for this, I need to think, do I need to provide context? So I think what I'll do is add in the background here, maybe a bar, which is blurred out. All right, so I found this image here on Unsplash, and I'll just drag it here into the bottom layer. So what I'll do is add some Gaussian blur here. That does look okay. This blue here on this side is adding too many colors to it, and it's getting confusing. I'll make this larger here. I think that's good. Can't decide if that's still too busy. I'll decrease the brightness like that, and that is helping. Cool. I think that looks better. Now, one of the steps that I talked about is ensuring that everything takes up as much space as possible. As you can see, there's quite a bit of space here, quite a bit of space here, here as well. That's not providing any context because this background here is, very, very faint. Doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do here is just ensure all the elements are as large as possible. Now the problem is if this image of me is too large, then this stake doesn't look large anymore. So that's one thing to consider. I'll make this much larger like that. That looks better. But this £2 sign here maybe can't be that large because then the stake looks small. So maybe something like that. All right, that looks good. What I'm going to do here is just copy my layer and do convert to smart object. And you've probably seen this before where people basically just smooth out faces and stuff like that. Add a bit of contrast, scroll down, add some sharpening, and add some noise reduction. So as you can see, that is the thing that smooths out faces here. You don't want to do it too much or it just doesn't look realistic, basically. So it's kind of finding the right balance. I also like to add some texture. And then once you're happy with it, hit OK. So this here is the before, and then this here is the after. So as you can see, it's very, very small. That's not going to be the thing that holds you back from going viral. And that's why I don't want to talk about that stuff that much in detail. But as you can see, this here is a pretty good thumbnail. All right, so we started with the Caveman Game. Then we checked the requirements. And then after that, we created this incredible piece of art here where we have all of the Caveman Game elements. And then from this, we turn it into this. Now this here isn't Photoshop wizardry or anything. And if you don't have this smooth face effect here, it really doesn't matter that much. All of this stuff here is just the fine tuning. The thing that's most likely holding you back is you just don't have these elements planned out. All right, now that we've created our thumbnail in Photoshop or Canva or whatever program you're using, the next step of the craft process is T, which stands for tick boxes and tests. So let's go through it in the next video. All right, so it's the last step here of the craft process, which is T, the tick boxes and the tests. So here you can see the thumbnail that we ended up with. First, we did the Caveman Game. Here we understood what visual elements do we need in the thumbnail to visually explain the premise of this video. After that, we went through the requirements to ensure that we had all the different requirements needed for this packaging. The who, the verb, the noun, and the difficulty. After that, we went through the arrangement and we looked at what's the most ideal way to arrange all of these different elements. That way our brain can easily understand what's happening in the thumbnail. Then in the fine-tuning stage, we took all of these elements and put them together in whatever program you're using. And yes, you can add a few elements like shadows and bevels and all of this stuff. But really the important thing in this step is to take what your arrangement is, screenshot that, and use that as the backdrop so you know where everything should be placed. Now lastly, before we upload this, we want to go through the tick boxes and we want to go through the tests that we talked about in the SAW process. So this document here is the tick boxes and the tests that we'll be doing with the thumbnail. This here is included in the course, so you can go through every single thumbnail you design and ensure it meets this criteria here. So the first thing is, does it stand out from your niche? This design here that we made for Vegetarian Survives the 2-Pound Steak Challenge, it does stand out from the niche. This is what it would look like if it looked like in the average niche. So instead, it looks like this. So we can check off that tick box, and if you want, you can use the test of the niche home feed test. There is a PNG attached as well, completely free in the course. So what you can do is put this PNG into Canva or Photoshop or whatever you want, and add here the typical thumbnails for your niche. And obviously leave one of them blank, and this is where you'll add your design. So we've made sure that it stands out. The next thing here is making sure that it's obvious. So the first tick box here in is it obvious is, does it use the fewest elements possible? I do think that the thumbnail achieves that. The next thing here is, does the background provide context? The background here isn't providing context, so we've made it very blurry and made sure that it's not blending in with the background. We could possibly even do a brick wall or a white wall in the background, and that would possibly work as well. The next thing here is the text legible? The only text here is where it says 2 pounds, and yes, that is very legible, which is good. The next tick box is everything as large as possible? This is very important, and yes, in Photoshop, we ensure that every item here takes up as much space as possible, because when we see it on YouTube, we're going to see it very, very small. So it's important here that every element takes up as much space as possible. The next tick box is everything visible? So what we'll do is put the PNG overlay on top, and we can see here that everything is visible. All right, so now we have our 3 tests, the split second test. So if I see this in a split second, do I understand what the premise is? I quickly see a guy staring at a 2-pound steak. But maybe in the split second test here, it's not obvious enough that this character here is vegan. So maybe that's something that needs improving, such as using a brand that we recognize or making the shirt green or something, whatever seems stereotypically vegan. By the way, I quickly want to say I am plant-based, so I don't want to make it seem like I'm making fun of vegans or anything. The next test here is the blur test. So when you blur this thumbnail, is it still obvious what this video is about? And then lastly, we have the zoom out test. If you zoom out of this thumbnail, is it still obvious what this video is about? And yes, I do think it is still obvious. So now we've made sure that it stands out, and now we've made sure that it's obvious. As you can see by doing this test, we are making changes to the thumbnail, which is a good thing. We want to ensure the thumbnail is as optimized as possible, obviously. That's why we're all here. So if you have to make some changes, then that's okay. That means this T part of the craft process is doing its job. The next step here is ruminate. So as I went through in the course, there are some tactics that we can do just to enhance this curiosity gap, but I believe here that it's doing a very good job. So is the video's premise visualized? Yes, it is. I think it's done a very good job of that. And the next question is the video's value visually clear? I think it's obvious that this here isn't an educational video. This is clearly an entertainment-based video, which is good. That's what we want. And we can see here that this is probably a comedy video. It's not going to be a drama or a psychological thriller or anything like that. This here is most likely going to be a comedy challenge style video. So the video's premise is visualized and the value is clear. This here is going to cause someone to ruminate and to open a bunch of unanswered questions. So now the thumbnail stands out, it is obvious, and it's causing you to ruminate. The last thing here is it earnest? Now, obviously this here isn't a real channel. I don't actually do this, but for your channel, you want to answer, is it earnest to you? If it's not, let's say that this is a vegan cooking channel and they saw this thumbnail, that's not going to be very earnest to them. That's not going to seem like an authentic piece of content that they actually want to click on. But then let's say you have like a typical challenge channel or eating channel, something like that, then yes, this might seem earnest to the audience and something that they would want to watch. Then the next question is this earnest to the video itself? So is this clickbait basically? So let's say in the video, the vegan actually sits down and eats some steak. Then yes, this is earnest to the video itself. It's not lying. But hypothetically, if I recorded this and sat down and ate a block of tofu, then that's not going to be earnest. Then that is lying in the thumbnail, AKA it's just clickbait. And then the last question here is, does it look professional? If your thumbnail doesn't look professional, it doesn't have to be a work of art, it doesn't have to win any design awards, but if it doesn't look semi-professional, then people probably won't click on it. If the thumbnail looks professional, then most likely that will reflect that the video itself is professional as well. And when it comes to this, it's pretty obvious. People just want to watch good videos. So if your thumbnail looks professional, people will presume that you have a professional and good video as well. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, you can download this checklist. It's just a checklist you can go through for every thumbnail you design. I hope you found this useful. Thank you so much for taking my course. If you have any questions or you want me to elaborate on anything, let me know and I'll add it to the course. But thank you so much for watching the whole thing and best of luck on your YouTube journey. In this video, I'm going to use my framework here to come up with a new YouTube title. I'm actually going to do it for a channel called Wildlife with Cookie. I've designed a thumbnail for him in the past and also come up with another title for him. So I thought, why not film the entire process and just do it as a bonus for the course. Okay, let's get into it. So I'll just read out his email real quick. I'm going to try and film a long-eared owl tomorrow. It's super elusive here, so anything you have in mind for that would be cool. I'm also heading to a farm in February that has thousands of red kites, which is a type of bird, and the odd albino one as well, which is very rare. And then another idea, I'm heading to a wildlife hide that specializes in kingfisher photography in March. It is the best place in the UK to do it. All right, cool. So we have a few different ideas here. Maybe I can't decide. Maybe I'll do all three actually, just so you can see kind of the process here. I'm going to film a long-eared owl tomorrow. Super elusive here. So I film a long-eared owl. That is video idea number one. And then basically we're going to use these frameworks here to be more optimized. The other one he was going to do, heading to a farm, I film red kites in a farm. So that's the second video. And then the last one was, I'm heading to a wildlife hide that specializes in kingfisher photography. I photograph kingfishers in a wildlife hide. Cool. So these are literally what he's doing in the video. So you'll just write down what you plan to do in the video. So you don't have to like try and think of a cool angle or anything just yet. That's what we're going to do here. So let's start with I filmed a long-eared owl. So I is the who. So, I mean, that's fine. It's not no trust and it's not full trust. It's pretty specific. The more specific it is, I feel like you get a bit more trust. If it's just I photograph wildlife, there's a bit less trust there. Whereas if you're going super specific, it's like, okay, this person clearly knows what they're talking about. We'll say I is dead center here. Then we have verb, which is film. That's pretty boring. That's pretty boring. Then we have the noun, which is the long-eared owl. Okay, so in terms of the niche to known, long-eared owl, I don't know that bird. I don't know if it's super elusive. I think he said it is. Yeah, it's super elusive here. I mean, that's very, very niche. Yeah, that's pretty niche. And the difficulty, there's no difficulty here. So right now, it just sounds pretty easy. So this is right now what we're working with. So let's try and do a better title for this. So I film a long-eared owl. He is a wildlife expert, so let's do that. Film. Film is a very boring word, and it doesn't sound exciting. So we're just trying to make it sound more exciting. Let's just go with captures or records. Oh, captures sounds more difficult. Captures, and then long-eared owl. Long-eared owl is way too niche. So let's go broad with it, and it's just owl, and then difficulty. Let's add the difficulty in here.
Wildlife expert captures super elusive is the words he used. Yeah, super elusive. Wildlife expert captures super elusive owl. So with this new one, wildlife expert, there's definitely, I would say there's a lot of trust with that. Then we have captures. That's more exciting. It's not insanely exciting, I don't think. Noun, owl, that's known. So just so you can see here, by not specifying it's the long-eared owl, and just making it way more known, so just saying owl, because everyone knows what an owl is. We all picture an owl, whether it's the long-eared owl, a barn owl, or whatever it is. And then super elusive. I don't like the term super elusive. I don't think it sounds difficult enough. The super elusive. We're going to go here for that, I think. Yeah. So now we're going to think about the word capture here. All right, let's do films synonyms instead. Shoots, records, takes pictures of, makes a film of, captures on film, video, photographs. It doesn't sound exciting enough. It's just a guy taking a photo of an owl. We need to make it sound like it was a mission. Yeah, basically just make it sound more exciting. Captures is all right. Films, finally records. Let's go tracks down. Wildlife expert tracks down super elusive owl. All right, now we need to make super elusive sound more difficult. Super elusive isn't giving me, that it's super difficult. So maybe endangered. I don't know if it is endangered. Yeah, endangered. Okay, synonyms for endangered. At risk, threatened, vulnerable, on the brink, critically rare, under threat, near extinction, hard to find, secretive, evasive, shy, untraceable, ghost-like. That's interesting. Hidden, fleeting. Does the long-eared owl have any nicknames? Okay, so I looked up if the long-eared owl has any nicknames, and apparently it's called the cat owl, the lesser horned owl, the eared owl, but it's also got regional nicknames such as the ghost owl, used in some areas due to its silent flight. That's interesting. The night watcher and the wood owl, ghost owl. That sounds interesting. Wildlife expert tracks down the endangered ghost owl. So obviously at the start of the video, if he chose to do this one, he would have to explain, I'm looking for the endangered ghost owl. The ghost owl is the nickname for the long-eared owl. That way, for wildlife nerds, they understand that, the ghost owl isn't a species, but it's just a nickname. But I actually quite like this one. Wildlife expert tracks down endangered ghost owl. So we went from I film a long-eared owl to wildlife expert tracks down endangered ghost owl. That is a much, much better title. All right, the next one here is I film red kites in a farm. All right, that doesn't sound that exciting. So what did he say? He said, I'm heading to a farm in February that has thousands of red kites and the odd albino one, which is very rare. Okay. Here's the thing, we don't know if he's going to spot the albino one. And if he doesn't, I'm presuming he would still want to film it, because if there's thousands of red kites, which is a specific bird, then that's still interesting, even if there's not an albino kite there. So let's look at this. We have I, once again, that is just in the middle here. It's not a lot of trust, it's not full trust. I film, again, film is just pretty boring. Red kites, again, it's pretty niche. You have to know what that species is. That's very niche. And then in a farm. The difficulty, that sounds easy. You're just in a farm. So yeah, this one needs quite a bit of work, which is good. So let's go through the process. I filmed red kites in a farm. Okay, we could do wildlife expert once again. Let's do one where this remains as I, just to mix it up, unless I figure something better. But let's keep it as I for this one. And then let's focus on these three, because they all need a bit of work. So I film. Again, we need another word for film. So tracks down. What were the other ones we had? Okay. I observe, I watched, I surveilled, I monitored, I noticed, I spotted. Maybe it should be more adventurous, kind of like, the Ryan Trahan, Airac, all of those kind of videos. So I survived, or I explored, or let's go with explored synonyms. I investigate. That's a pretty good word. Investigate is really interesting. So there's thousands of red kites here, which is I investigate. Oh, that's interesting. So red kite here, that needs changing. No one knows what that means. So what is the broad term for kites? They're a type of raptor, if I believe they are. Okay, the red kite is a large bird of prey, which includes other raptors, such as eagles. Okay, I don't know what people know and recognize more. So basically, we're just trying to get it more known here. Do people know the term raptor, or do they know the term bird of prey? Which one do they know more? I think more people know what a bird of prey is. I investigate bird of prey. Okay, and now Bird of prey. So this new line now, I is still here. Investigate sounds quite interesting. So I'd say it's here. Actually, no, it's here. That's exciting. That sounds exciting and interesting. Bird of prey is more known, but I'm not going to say it's incredibly known. And then difficulty. So he said there's thousands, right? That has thousands. It's like a swarm of them, or like what's another word for swarm? A flock, a crowd. I do like swarm. I investigate the swarm. I investigate Britain's swarm of bird of prey. That doesn't read well, but that has all the components that I think are necessary. So we have bird of prey here, and now we have the swarm here, making it sound difficult. Is the fact that it's in Britain interesting, actually, in hindsight? I can't decide if that makes it more interesting. That might make it sound less interesting, because then you're only interested if you're in Britain, perhaps. He could do for this idea here, let's say if we removed Britain here, what you could do is have one of the thumbnails, so thumbnail A here, have all the components, and then have, Big Ben or something, that big British clock. You have that in the background, then you know where the video is taking place. So that's my bird there. That could work, because then you know where it takes place. Let's think about this some more. I investigate Britain's swarm of prey. I investigate how do I say there's thousands? I investigate the swarm of raptors. Can I say 1,000 in the flock? Or that might sound too niche. I don't know. I don't know what the average knowledge is of a person for something like this. Like, does the average person think that, raptors fly in flocks of 1,000? Because if they do, if the average person thinks they fly in groups, then it's not that interesting of an idea. So maybe I investigate why these raptors live in thousands. Does that make sense? I investigate why these raptors live in thousands. That doesn't make sense. I investigate why this raptor lives in a flock of 1,000. That's kind of interesting. I still think it's too niche. You have to know that that's not normal. Or we go back to the farm idea. I investigate the farm infested with raptors. Now that's interesting. Yeah, that I like. I investigate the farm infested with raptors. That is I really like that title. So what he could do here is, you still have A here where you can see that it's Britain. And then, in the second one, you would just do, my typical caveman technique where you have him probably looking through binoculars. These are my binoculars here. Then you would have a farm, of course, and then you would have one with a bunch of raptors, and possibly you would write thousands, something like that. I know there's quite a few elements in that one, but that could work. I actually quite like this new title now. So we went from I film red kites in a farm to I investigate the farm infested with raptors. The farm does actually sound quite interesting. Like, why does this one farm have so many birds of prey? The other option is you go a bit broader with it. So it's I investigate why Britain is infested with raptors. Personally, I think this one is better, as it's less... I feel like this one is more of a lie to go that broad, because it's not all of Britain. It's just this one farm, which is more interesting, actually. Okay, yeah, I think it's more interesting. So we have this one, which I quite like, and we have this one, which I quite like. And now if we look at this new title, so that's the same, that hasn't changed. Then investigate, definitely more exciting. Raptors is way more known. And then we have the farm infested, which I would probably put here. Farm is the only thing that sounds kind of plausible. It makes sense that a bunch of birds of prey are hanging around a farm. Whereas if you change the angle to, the house, so I investigated, that's kind of interesting. I investigated the house infested with raptors. That's quite interesting. I like that. I actually think that's quite a good one. So at the start of this video, it would have to start with something like, this house here is located in Britain. It's situated on a farm and it's got 1,000 red kites flying around it. Why is that the case? Today, I'm here to find out. So then we understand very, very clearly what's happening. So in that case, we're just repeating the title, but we're just saying it a bit more specifically. All right, let's look at the last one here. I photograph kingfishers in a wildlife hide. So let's delete these markers here. I hope you're finding this interesting. If you want more of these, by the way, let me know and I'll film more because I think these are very valuable, or at least I hope they're valuable. So, all right, once again, that sits around here. That's just, there's not a lack of trust and there's not more trust for something like that. Then we have photograph. I don't know. That's fine. Kingfishers, I know what one is, but does the average person know what a kingfisher is? I don't know. I don't think it's as niche as, the long-eared owl, for example, but it is pretty niche. So I'll go around there for that one. And then we have in a wildlife hide. That sounds easy. Yeah, that doesn't sound difficult enough. All right, let's look at this. So I might actually just move this down here. So how do we fix this? Photograph. Let's leave that. Kingfishers. How do we make kingfishers more exciting? In the email, he said, I'm heading off to a wildlife hide that specializes in kingfisher photography. It's the UK's best, I would say. Okay, so it's the best in the UK. So kingfishers, small, medium-sized, brightly colored birds. I don't know. All right, so I searched up if the kingfisher in the UK has any different names. It's referred to as the jewel of the waterways. However, there are no widely recognized nicknames for the specific species. Okay, we might have to keep it with kingfisher. So my guess is, depending on if the kingfisher is a popular bird that people care about, that it's just very niche, which basically means we just have to make this sound really difficult. How can we make this sound difficult? Because right now it sounds very easy. I photograph kingfishers in a wildlife hide. And it's also pretty easy because he says it's the best spot in the UK to do it. So it's not even like I photograph a kingfisher in Antarctica or something. I'm presuming they don't live in Antarctica. I photograph kingfishers. One idea is we could add a time limit to it. So that would make it more difficult. Or it's a bad camera, I try the kingfisher 24-hour photography challenge. Something like that. That now sounds like it's more difficult. I photograph kingfishers in a wildlife hide. Just doesn't sound difficult. I tried the Kingfisher 24-hour photography challenge. Challenge makes it sound more exciting. It sounds like he's overcoming something, and the 24-hour adds a time limit, which is good. Wildlife hide sounds easy. So I'm wondering if hideout or secret hideout. I found fishes by this secret hideout. That's kind of interesting. I found kingfishers by this secret hideout. Now that sounds more difficult. Again, it's just a bird hide still, but secret hideout sounds more exciting than bird hide. So that's good. And it sounds obviously more difficult because it's a secret. So I like that. So I like that angle. That's good. Again, with the time limit, if he's in the bird hide for, I sat for 24 hours straight to get this photo. Is that interesting? I sat for 24 hours straight to get this photo. That's not a bad idea. We're just trying to find a good angle for this video. It's very niche because it's kingfishers, so it's very niche. Bird photography is reasonably boring to the average person, so we're trying to make it sound more exciting. And then the difficulty of sitting in just in a wooden box isn't that difficult. So I'm just trying to make this more appealing to more people. That's the goal here. I sat for 24 hours straight to get this photo. That's good. That's good. I wonder if I can go the angle of he's seeing the kingfisher in its natural habitat, kind of like a nature documentary in the way where it's capturing it in its natural habitat no one has seen before, because that's difficult. But obviously that might not be true, so it's difficult to have that title and then actually promise on that title. So that's quite difficult. It will be by a river. So, okay, let's go a completely different angle. I hiked along this river to get this photo. I hiked along this river to get this photo. That hiked doesn't sound that exciting. So that right now is the verb. I hiked along this river to get this photo. That's not fun. Tracking UK most beautiful photography challenge. Tracking the UK's most beautiful bird photography challenge. I hope you're finding this interesting. This stuff isn't on YouTube and stuff because it would be the worst retention. So it wouldn't get 2 views. But I think that, this stuff is really valuable to see the process. So let's combine a few of these. I tried the Kingfisher 24-hour photography challenge. What do I like? I found kingfishers by the secret hideout. Words that I like: secret hideout. Let's do this. This one is secret hideout. Which verb do I like here? I try, I found, I sat, I hiked, tracking. All right, synonyms for track down. Pursue, hunt, chase, scout, locate, search for, maybe. Sitting for 24 hours straight to get a photo. That's an interesting premise because you want to see what the photo is. If you're into photography, that's an interesting journey because, you know, instead of just taking a photo, sitting for 24 hours just to get one photo is an interesting journey to go on. So, journey. I don't know. Journeyed? I journeyed? Is that a word? More synonyms. I pinpoint. I trail. I uncover. That's not bad. I discover. Unveil. Follow the trail. Navigate. Spot. Maybe located. Isn't that bad? I located. And now we have to say the noun. And I think the noun has to be kingfisher. So I located the kingfisher at the secret hideout. I sat for 24 hours straight. All right, exciting synonyms for sitting. Perched, hunkered down, settled, crouched, bunkered. Bunkered, interesting. Anchored, posted, parked, roosted, embedded, camped. He's not camping. Squatted, hideaway, immersed. Maybe tracked down. I know I said tracked down up here as well. Wildlife expert tracks down endangered ghost owl. But I might have to go with track down again. I tracked down kingfishers. He did say in another email to me that his audience really like finding birds in the UK specifically. So maybe it's worth saying UK's kingfishers. I tracked down the UK's kingfisher by this secret hideout. So again, I actually think we'll do the same thing as up here, where this would be an A/B test, where we have the Big Ben as one of them to see if people care that it's specifically in the UK, and then having some that don't include the Big Ben. I tracked down the kingfisher by this secret hideout. After all of this, I actually almost prefer I found kingfishers by this secret hideout. Found. Maybe it's just that. There's a lot of overthinking, as you can hear, but that is, that's what we're doing here. This 20 minutes or 15 minutes of work can have 10x the results of your video or more, 100x the results on your video just because of these small changes here. So if you're going to spend a day or 2 days or 3 days or a week making a YouTube video, spend another 10 minutes just thinking about the title because that will have such a big impact. So let's go through here. We have I filmed a long-eared owl, became wildlife expert tracks down endangered ghost owl. That sounds very interesting to me. Wildlife expert tracks down endangered ghost owl. I would definitely click on that. Then we have I film red kites in a farm. Not that interesting, and it's been changed to I investigate the house infested with raptors. I think that is a very good title. I'm quite happy with that. And then I photograph kingfishers in a wildlife hide. Became I found kingfishers by this secret hideout. We could add Britain here. I found kingfishers by Britain's secret hideout, just because he said a lot of his audience is in Britain and they specifically like the videos where he's exploring Britain. So that could be another angle for this. But here you can see the full process. I hope this has been useful. This is quite a long recording, but I think this will be super helpful. If you want more of these, let me know. I will film more. I think this is super valuable. Thanks for watching. Best of luck with your channel.